Chapter 24:12. Rumble, rumble. Violent rumbling sounds continuously rang out from the water layer. Waves of energy crashed into the mind of a giant dragon. Rumble. The next moment, the majestic waves and the sword shadows collided with each other. In an instant, a violent force spread in all directions. Turbid waves rose from the water and engulfed Nietian and the dozen or so scaled demon cultivators. Lian Jiofeng and the others felt the impact of the waves. They couldn't bear it and kept retreating. Rumble. Zzz, zzz. Explosions rang out continuously in the air. At the same time, there was an ear-piercing sound. This was the sound of two forces clashing against each other. Everyone stopped and stared at the turbid waves in the water with burning eyes. The waves formed a whirlpool that spun continuously like roaring beasts. The water within 10,000 meters shook violently as if it would collapse at any moment. Everyone's expressions changed continuously. The shock in their hearts was perfectly displayed on their faces. After a long time, the turbulent water gradually calmed down. A figure slowly appeared in front of everyone and became clearer and clearer. Nietian. Everyone exclaimed in unison when they saw the figure's face. At this moment, the person standing in the water was none other than Nietian. Nietian's body was covered in blood. There were several glaring wounds on his body that were left by the waves. However, his eyes were still sharp and his aura was very stable. How terrifying! Everyone came to their senses. Their eyes trembled violently, and they gasped. Nietian had fought against a dozen or so scaled demon cultivators alone. In the end, he had killed a dozen or so scaled demon cultivators with a single strike. Although Nietian was injured because of this, there was no doubt that his combat strength was terrifying. How can this guy be so strong? Nangong Lin frowned. The muscles on his face trembled slightly. He was extremely shocked. He had originally thought that Nietian's strength was similar to his, or even slightly weaker. But only now did he realize how terrifying Nietian was. Pooh! While everyone was still in shock, Nietian's figure moved slightly. He took a few steps back and spat out a mouthful of blood. The strength of these scaled beasts is indeed terrifying. Nietian smiled bitterly and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His pale complexion slightly improved. Even though Nietian's martial body was abnormal, he was still heavily injured after fighting against more than a dozen scaled demon warriors. However, the injuries on his body were not fatal. He only needed to rest for a while to recover. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Nietian's lips curled into a smile as he prepared to walk over. Nietian, be careful. At that moment, Jun Ouching seemed to have noticed something and suddenly screamed, "Brat, go to hell." Just as Jun Ouching's voice fell, an incomparably sinister voice suddenly came from the dark water layer. Boom! Then, a terrifying force appeared, stirring up the water within a few thousand meters and condensing into a huge palm shadow. It suddenly shot out and blasted toward Nietian. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Nietian's eyes suddenly focused. He wanted to counterattack, but it was too late. Subconsciously, a layer of white light lit up on his body. The light yang sky armor was activated. Boom! In the next moment, the huge palm shadow fell and landed on Nietian's body. A muffled explosion sounded in the water. Nietian's figure was directly sent flying, drawing a bloody trail in the water. Boom! His figure crashed heavily into a huge reef thousands of meters away. The huge black reef, which was at least 100 meters in size, instantly crumbled. Nietian's figure slowly came to a stop, but he was like a corpse floating in the water. Not dead. At that moment, the sinister voice sounded again. Then, a black light appeared and rushed toward Nietian. The figure sensed that Nietian's aura was still there. He was not dead. He had to kill Nietian directly, so he wanted to attack again. At that moment, a clear voice suddenly sounded. Nietian. It was Jun Ouching. Then, Jun Ouching's figure suddenly appeared like a ghost. The moment she approached the black light, She directly slashed down and bombarded the black light. Huh. The black light paused for a moment and let out a muffled groan. It seemed that it was injured. Obviously, it did not expect that June Ouching's attack would be so strange. She was so close to it in an instant. At that moment, the figure's face became clear. It was a face that was very similar to the scaled demon martial artist. However, this face was more like a human's. Boom! Before the figure could completely stabilize himself, a violent attack appeared. It was a ball of fierce flames that fell straight toward the figure. The figure was caught off guard and was sent flying by the flames. The person who had attacked was none other than Lai Jiufeng. "Leave," growled the figure, who had been repeatedly injured. Then, his body flashed like lightning as he left. June Ouching ignored him and went to Nie Tian's side. When she saw that Nie Tian was covered in blood and that his aura was extremely weak, she could not help but tear up. At that moment, Nie Tian suddenly opened his eyes. His lips trembled as he said with difficulty, "I'm fine, Nie Tian." Hearing Nie Tian speak, June Ouching could no longer hold back her tears. They flowed down her delicate cheeks. "Silly girl, what are you crying for?" Nie Tian moved slightly. He stood up and wiped away the tears on June Ouching's face. He forced a smile. "I won't cry, I won't cry," June Ouching laughed and said as she wiped away her tears. "Since you're not dead, you should rest well. Stop showing off your love," Lai Jiufeng said coldly as he walked over and raised an eyebrow. June Ouching blushed, her cheeks rosy. The corner of Nie Tian's lips curled up slightly, but he did not say anything. The scene just now had been extremely dangerous. Fortunately, Nie Tian had activated the light, young heavenly armor at the last moment and blocked most of the attack for him. Otherwise, he would have died on the spot. The person who had attacked was very strong. He wanted to attack again and kill Nie Tian, but June Ouching and Lai Jiufeng stopped him. The person did not know how terrifying June Ouching was. He had been careless, injured, and then heavily injured by Lai Jiufeng. That was why he had fled. Under normal circumstances, Lai Jiufeng and June Ouching might not be a match for that person, even if they worked together. Who is that person? Nie Tian consumed a divine pill and took a deep breath. His pale face improved slightly, but he couldn't help but ask with lingering fear. He hadn't seen the appearance of the person who had attacked just now. It should be a scaled demon martial practitioner. Lai Jiufeng frowned and said solemnly, "But that person is very intelligent." It seems that the scaled demon evil art did not make him lose his mind. Nie Tian's eyes focused, and he nodded slightly. Normal scaled demon martial practitioners did not have high intelligence. This scaled demon martial practitioner knew to ambush them from the shadows. This meant that he had the intelligence of a normal martial practitioner at the very least. Moreover, he spoke like a normal martial practitioner, unlike the scaled demon martial practitioner who could only speak simple words. Chapter 24:13. Nie Tian looked at Lai Jiufeng and was stunned. He asked, "Will the Dark Emperor send more people? What do you think?" Lai Jiufeng asked in return. He did not answer, but said directly, "I am very curious. What kind of experts will appear after the Dark Emperor Imperial Guards and the Scaled Beasts?" Nie Tian frowned. He could not hide the worry on his face. They had just been attacked by the Dark Emperor Imperial Guards and the Scaled Beasts, but this was not the end. As long as Nie Tian and the others were not dead, the Dark Emperor would not stop. He just did not know what kind of experts the Dark Emperor would send. Next, Nie Tian rested. He had to recover his strength before the next wave of pursuers appeared. At the same time, in the Dark Emperor's hall in the #1 city of Dark Prison, a black-robed figure stood in the spacious hall. His aura was like a gentle breeze. His aura did not seem shocking at first glance, but upon closer inspection, one would be shocked to find that his aura was as vast as the sea. It was endless and vast. He stood in the hall like an emperor, standing at the top of the clouds and ruling over the world. At this time, his figure was like a huge cauldron, unmoving. It was as if he was waiting for something. "He's back." At this time, he suddenly turned around. His eyes released two cold rays that locked onto a figure that had appeared outside the hall. In the next instant, His figure moved with extreme speed. He left several afterimages in the air as he arrived outside the hall. Outside the hall, a 4-meter-tall figure stood. There were 2 wounds on his body, and his huge body trembled slightly. This huge figure was a scaled beast that had ambushed Nietion earlier. The black-robed figure in front of the scaled beast was the absolute ruler of Dark Prison, the Dark Emperor. If Nietion was here, he would be shocked to find that the Dark Emperor's face was exactly the same as Li Juhan's. The Dark Emperor and Li Juhan did not look alike, but exactly the same. Their facial features were exactly the same. Even twin brothers would not be able to have such identical appearances. However, this person was not Li Juhan, but the Dark Emperor. Fail. The Emperor of the Dark World looked at the scaled demon warrior. His eyes narrowed as he spoke in a deep voice. His voice was deep, giving off a suffocating sense of oppression. Lord Dark Emperor, that brat's strength is too terrifying. This subordinate sneak attack succeeded and heavily injured him. But one of the people beside him is a space-time martial artist. This subordinate was careless for a moment and was injured by them. The scaled demon answered carefully, his voice trembling uncontrollably. It was obvious that he was very afraid of the Dark Emperor. And then, the Dark Emperor spoke coldly, his expression not changing in the slightest. Then, the scaled demon warrior lowered his head and didn't dare to look at the Dark Emperor. He said, "This subordinate is heavily injured and can no longer fight. I can only return. But Lord Dark Emperor, don't worry. That silver martial warrior was severely injured by me. He will definitely die." Oomph. Suddenly, the Dark Emperor sneered, and a chill actually rose from his entire body. "Lord Dark Emperor, spare me." The scaled demon warrior seemed to have sensed something and screamed in fear. His knees went weak, and he knelt on the ground. Trash that can't complete the mission still dares to come back. The Dark Emperor smiled coldly, and suddenly slammed his palm forward. Wherever his palm passed by, a bloody glow appeared. The scaled demon warrior died instantly. He didn't even have the chance to scream. The celestial demon, nascent embryo, is indeed powerful. The corner of the Dark Emperor's mouth twitched slightly as he spoke coldly. With a strange smile in his eyes, he mumbled, "I can't get that extreme demon nascent embryo. And now, there's a celestial demon nascent embryo. Looks like even the heavens are helping me." As he spoke, the smile on the Dark Emperor's face became wider, and the sinister smile on his face became more obvious. "Li Qi." Then, the Dark Emperor suddenly spoke. "Here." Then, the void trembled slightly, and a figure appeared. He slowly raised his head and looked at the Dark Emperor. To everyone's surprise, the face was exactly the same as the Dark Emperor's, except that his aura was slightly weaker. The Dark Emperor, Li Qi, and Li Juhan. The 3 of them looked exactly the same. This was too strange. It's time to let the ancient Ming god of massacre make his move. The Dark Emperor glanced at Li Qi and said with a faint smile, "Lord Dark Emperor, are you really going to let 7 kills make his move?" Li Qi was stunned for a moment. He seemed to be a little hesitant before he said, "One of the outsiders has the meridian of 3 lives. He must be from the ancient Ming tribe. They must have come to the Dark Ocean prison to save 7 kills. If we release 7 kills, will it?" Our 6 Li Qi didn't continue. He looked at the Dark Emperor and waited for the latter's reply. The corner of the Dark Emperor's mouth twitched as he smiled. "Don't worry. The current 7 kills is completely under this Emperor's control. He is a blade in this Emperor's hand. If I don't use him, then wouldn't there be no point in him existing?" "Yes, Lord Dark Emperor." Li Qi's eyes flickered. He bowed slightly and left. The Dark Emperor looked in the direction where Li Qi had left with a strange smile on his face. Humph. Suddenly, the Dark Emperor sneered and said, "The celestial demon nascent embryo and the meridian of 3 lives. If I can obtain this power, it'll be enough for me to escape from the Dark Ocean prison. Emperor of the Underworld, you've used the Dark Ocean prison to imprison me for so many years. Never in your wildest dreams did you think that the one who helped me escape would be someone from the ancient Ming tribe." After saying that, The Dark Emperor turned into a cloud of black smoke and entered the Dark Emperor Hall. At the same time, at the bottom of the dark ocean hunting sea, Nietion was sitting with his legs crossed. The aura around him was gradually stabilizing. The wounds on his body had all healed. In just half a day's time, he had recovered from his serious injuries. It's one thing for this guy to have a strong martial body, but why is his recovery speed so insane as well? Nangong Lin thought to himself as he stared at Nietion. He had a feeling that becoming Nietion's enemy was a mistake. Lian Jiufeng locked his gaze on Nietion and thought to himself, the Yuan restraining pill is about to take effect. I hope it's not too late. Boom! At this moment, a loud explosion suddenly came from the bottom of the sea. The entire sea began to shake violently as waves crashed into the water. What's going on? Is there going to be a tsunami? Yang Qi was stunned for a moment before he cried out in alarm. Nietion came to his senses and rose to his feet. He spread out his divine sense, and his eyes narrowed. His expression changed. He sensed that the surrounding waters were filled with an intense, murderous aura. It seemed like the murderous intent had caused the water to shake all of a sudden. Boom! In the next moment, a monstrous wave suddenly rose from the water tens of thousands of meters away. It was like a giant dragon soaring into the sky. A terrifying force began to wreak havoc. The entire water became even more restless. In an instant, an even more terrifying, murderous intent spread out. It was as if the water was being sliced apart. Chapter 24:14. Lian Jiufeng's expression was one of utter shock. His eyes trembled uncontrollably. He could feel the roiling, killing intent coming from the water. The killing intent was thick, bloody, and oppressive. There was also a familiar presence mixed in. Lian Jiufeng was all too familiar with this presence. It was 7 Kill's presence. He abruptly realized that 7 Kills was the one who had created the huge waves. 7 Kills. Lian Jiufeng hadn't expected it to be 7 Kills. He knew that the Dark Emperor would definitely send someone even stronger to kill them. However, he had never imagined that the Dark Emperor would send 7 Kills. Just who is this person? Why is he so terrifying? Nangong Lin's voice trembled slightly. The killing intent surging out of the water was too strong. The oppressive killing intent was enough to send shivers down one's spine. Nietion's eyes trembled violently as he felt the intense killing intent. The killing intent he felt right now was even stronger than the killing intent of the demon eyes of supreme killing. Just who was it that possessed a killing intent stronger than the demon eyes of supreme killing? There was only one answer in Nietion's mind, and that was the master of the demon eyes of supreme killing, 7 Kills. Rumble, rumble. At this time, the huge waves in the distance were growing more and more terrifying. Terrifying booms resounded continuously as the waves crashed against each other. It was as if they were going to crush this part of the sea completely. This killing intent is so strong. It's too terrifying. Yang Qi exclaimed. The fear in his eyes was indescribable. He had never seen such terrifying killing intent before. It was too strong. It was as if the killing intent could rush into his body and crush his organs with just a breath. Rumble. Bang. At this moment, an even more terrifying explosion was heard. Following this, the monstrous wave actually exploded. The monstrous wave instantly turned into countless sharp water blades that shot out in all directions. Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z. In the next moment, the sound of water blades slicing through the water rang out incessantly. That terrifying water blade contained an extreme, murderous aura. It was extremely sharp and terrifying. All the sea beasts within a radius of tens of thousands of meters were crushed into a bloody light after being swept by the sharp water blades. The water was filled with a strong smell of blood. The pungent smell was nauseating. Retreat. Nietion felt the boundless aura roaring towards him. He roared and spread his wings, creating a wild wave as he frantically retreated. Seeing this, the others quickly retreated. Everyone's speed was very fast, and they directly retreated into Soul Break Valley. Bang! 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 Countless sharp water blades rained down from the sky, but they were blocked by the hard reef outside the sea valley. Even so, Nietion and the others could still clearly feel the murderous aura rushing towards them. It was as sharp as a knife, as if it could tear everything apart. Such a murderous aura was too terrifying. After a long time, the surrounding waters became quiet. Nietion did not know the situation outside the valley, so he was very cautious and did not dare to be careless. 7 kills. Suddenly, Lion Jiofeng growled and charged forward. Seeing this, Nietion's eyes narrowed, and he immediately followed. The two of them rushed out of the Soul Break Valley and looked at the water layer in the distance. What entered their eyes was a huge figure standing there, its body surging with an abnormally fierce, killing intent, violent and sharp. Nietion was stunned when he saw the figure's appearance. He could not help but frown. The figure's appearance was very strange. It was over 3 meters tall, and although it looked like a human, its body was covered in black scales. Even its face was covered in scales. What was even more striking was that there was a bright red word carved on his cheek. Shockingly, it was slave. The word slave was deeply imprinted on its face. It was clearly left behind by some special method and could not be easily removed. This is the 7 kills. Nietion looked at the figure in front of him and said in shock, his face filled with disbelief. How could he have imagined that the legendary 7 kills would look like this? Although the person before him had the appearance of a human, the scales all over its body resembled that of a scaled beast cultivator. Moreover, its body was too huge. It did not look like a normal human at all. 7 kills. Lion Jiofeng growled when he saw the person before him. Then his eyes were filled with rage, and his entire body was trembling. He already understood what was going on. The person before him was indeed 7 kills. However, Qisha's appearance at the moment was not his original appearance. The Dark Emperor had used the scaled beast evil art to forcefully merge his martial body with the sea beast. What the Dark Emperor had done to 7 kills was not just that. He had also branded a humiliating mark on 7 kills' face, slave. The Dark Emperor had not treated 7 kills as a prisoner, but as a dog. Bastard. Lion Jiofeng knew what was going on. He let out a furious roar, and the power of golden flames surged around him, turning him into a huge fireball. He was so angry that he was on the brink of insanity. The ancient Ming race and the bloodline of 3 lives were the noblest things in his heart. How could he not be angry when someone had humiliated them so wantonly? Nietion frowned when he saw Lian Jiofeng's state. He was quite surprised. Lian Jiofeng's aura was growing stronger at a crazy rate. The power of golden flames around him was growing more and more violent. The flames were on the verge of exploding. The water around him roiled as if it was about to boil. QL11, it was clear that Lian Jiofeng had been hiding his strength. He was only revealing it now. Kill. At this moment, Qisha's figure suddenly moved. He growled, kill. Then he struck out with his palm. A violent palm shadow pressed down on Lian Jiofeng. Lian Jiofeng also threw a palm at Lian Jiofeng. The violent power of golden flames condensed into a giant flaming palm. Boom! In the next moment, the 2 palms collided. A huge wave rose from the water, and a terrifying power spread out. Lian Jiofeng was strong, but he was clearly no match for 7 kills. 7 kills was strong to begin with, and his sea beast body made his martial body even more monstrous. In his scaled demon form, 7 kills was close to peak divine realm. Bang! In the next moment, the flaming palm shattered. The power of golden flames surged into the water and roiled. Bang! There was a dull thud, and Lian Jiofeng was sent flying. He left a bloody trail in the water. Nietion reacted instantly when he saw this. He moved and caught Lian Jiofeng in his arms. Lian Jiofeng vomited a mouthful of blood before he could stabilize himself. Are you all right? Nietion supported Lian Jiofeng and asked solemnly. 7 kills was just too monstrous. He had heavily injured Lian Jiofeng with a casual palm. Chapter 24:15. Nietion looked at Lian Jiufeng. He didn't quite understand what the latter meant. QL11, Lian Jiufeng stared coldly at Nietion. A strange light flashed through his eyes, and he suddenly attacked. A wave of flames directly entered Nietion's body. "What are you doing, Lian Jiufeng?" Nietion growled as he retreated. His expression suddenly changed. He never thought that Lian Jiufeng would suddenly attack him after he saved him. "Nietion, it's time to release the power of darkness in your body." Lian Jiufeng's eyes darkened as his lips curled into a cold smile. It was at this moment that Nietion seemed to sense something, and his expression changed. "Ah!" In the next moment, he cried out miserably. It was as if his body had suddenly started to burn. Streams of darkness energy began to frantically surge out from his body. In the blink of an eye, Nietion felt an extremely terrifying force rushing into his body. The blazing heat seemed to be trying to burn him to ashes. "Not good, it's that Yuan inhibiting pill." Fat Cat cried out in fear. The flame Lian Jiufeng had injected into Nietion's body clearly didn't have that much power. The terrifying power that had erupted from Nietion's body had come from the Yuan inhibiting pill he had consumed earlier. "Nietion, that Yuan inhibiting pill does have the effect of suppressing origin energy." Lian Jiufeng retreated and looked at Nietion from afar. He said, "But you should know that when things reach an extreme, they will go in the opposite direction. When the Yuan inhibiting pill's power completely erupts, the originally calm heart of darkness in your body will no longer be able to remain calm. I did hide some of my strength, but you are my greatest trump card." The cold voice resounded in Nietion's ears, causing him to sink into fury. He never thought that Lian Jiufeng would be so cunning. The Yuan-suppressing pill was not to suppress the origin energy, but to make the heart of darkness explode. Immediately after, an even more intense pain appeared, causing Nietion to howl miserably again. His entire body was enveloped in black flames, and the surrounding water was directly pushed away. His aura was extremely violent and extremely dark. Under the influence of a Yuan restraining pill, the heart of darkness in Nietion's body instantly expanded from its original compressed state. The so-called extended state of origin energy was when the power contained in the origin energy was completely released. It was no longer compressed or restrained. Just imagine the darkness origin energy spreading through Nietion's body. Just how terrifying would the power he would have to endure right now? "Nietion, you must hold on." Fat Cat was extremely anxious, but there was nothing she could do. At this moment, he could only place his hopes on Nietion himself. He hoped that his martial body could withstand the extended state of the heart of darkness. "Nietion, what's wrong?" June Ouching's figure appeared at this moment. Her eyes flashed when she saw Nietion, and she cried out in surprise. "Don't come near me!" Nietion roared angrily. He did not allow June Ouching to approach him. His body was enveloped in endless darkness. He felt like he was about to be torn apart. He knew that he was about to enter a berserk state. It was extremely dangerous for June Ouching to approach him right now. June Ouching was stunned. She did not dare to approach Nietion when she sensed the aura of darkness on him. She did not know what had happened to Nietion. She did not know why he would suddenly become like this. "Kill!" Suddenly, a violent voice rang out once more. 7 kills attacked again. He thrust his palm forward, and the shadows of his palm surged forward, kicking up a huge wave that crashed toward everyone. Lian Jiufeng's eyes focused slightly. With a thought, a giant fire dragon appeared behind him. It was the Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon. "Stop him!" Lian Jiufeng growled. The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon rolled out and charged straight at the shadow of the palm. 7 kills was under the control of some evil art. He was a killing machine right now. He did not know who Lian Jiufeng was. He only had the most basic instinct to kill. His goal was to kill, and he would destroy everything. Bang! The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon charged over and collided heavily with the shadow of the palm. There was a huge explosion in the water. Roar! The Golden Flame Ancestral Dragon let out a growl when it was hit by the huge force. Its giant head shook slightly, and its dragon eyes stared at Seven Kills. There was a pair of black holes where Seven Kills' eyes were. The murderous aura around him was extremely sharp. The surrounding water rippled and was torn to pieces by the murderous aura. Seven Kills' demon eyes of extreme killing had been dug out, but his murderous aura was still as thick as ever. His silhouette stood there like a god of death descending to the world, releasing a frightening chill. Strands of murderous aura circulated in the air. It was suffocating. Roar! At this time, the Golden Flame ancestral dragon let out a wild roar. Its body rolled out, and it charged its 7 kills like a flame. Roar! 7 Kills let out a furious roar when he felt the incoming force. His aura burst out, and rays of murderous aura shot out like sharp blades. The murderous aura broke through the waves and formed a terrifying sharp blade that struck at the Golden Flame ancestral dragon. In the next moment, the blade of extreme killing landed and cut off one of the Golden Flame ancestral dragon's arms. Roar! The Golden Flame ancestral dragon let out a miserable howl as pain spread through its entire body. It seemed even more miserable in the bloody water. The sudden scene caused Lian Jiofeng's eyes to tremble. His body swayed for a moment. He never thought that 7 Kills would be so powerful even after losing his demon eyes of extreme killing. He had cut off one of the Golden Flame ancestral dragon's arms in one move. In his scaled demon form, 7 Kills was a killing machine. He only cared about killing and nothing else. The others were stunned by the scene before them as well. Their expressions trembled, and they subconsciously retreated. However, the scene that followed shocked everyone to the extreme. Roar! 7 Kills let out a deep roar. Like a wild beast, he suddenly moved and charged at the Golden Flame ancestral dragon. Bang! 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 Then, 7 Kills threw punch after punch. The shadows of 7 Kills' punches landed on the Golden Flame ancestral dragon's body, leaving bloody holes. In an instant, the Golden Flame ancestral dragon's huge body became a bloody mess. It looked like it could collapse at any time. Lian Jiofeng's eyes shook violently. He could not believe what he was seeing. Die! At this moment, 7 Kills suddenly spat out a bloody voice. In the next moment, his aura suddenly skyrocketed. His murderous aura instantly condensed. Boom! 7 Kills threw out a punch. An extremely sharp, extreme killing fist shadow was thrown out like a mountain, smashing towards the Golden Flame ancestral dragon. Roar! Sensing the approaching aura of death, the Golden Flame ancestral dragon let out a miserable howl. His entire body was trembling. Then, the bloodiest scene happened. Boom! The terrifying shadows of his punches exploded with unstoppable power. The murderous aura spread 10,000 meters away. The entire water seemed to have been sliced apart. Chapter 24:16. This extremely bloody scene caused everyone's eyes to freeze, their expressions to stiffen, and their breathing to stop. No one would have thought that Shisha's power would be this terrifying. He had actually split the Golden Flame ancestral dragon in half with a single punch. Lian Jiofeng's expression was the most shocked. His eyes trembled as if he couldn't believe what he had just seen. The Golden Flame ancestral dragon was his final trump card. He wouldn't use it unless he had no other choice. He had thought that even if the Golden Flame ancestral dragon wasn't 7 Kills' match, it could at least stall him for a while. He hadn't expected 7 Kills to be so violent in his scaled demon form. He had killed the Golden Flame ancestral dragon with a single punch. Pieces of flesh and blood flowed in the water. The air became even more bloody, and the pungent smell was nauseating. However, no one was in the mood to care about the smell. There was a terrifying killing machine standing in front of them. Roar! After killing the Golden Flame ancestral dragon with a single punch, 7 Kills roared like a wild beast. His roar shook the surroundings as if he was declaring that he was the ruler of this world. After the violent and shocking roar, everyone's expression was still sluggish. Even the golden flame ancestral dragon had turned into a worm in front of 7 kills. Who could stop 7 kills? At this time, beads of sweat appeared on Lian Jiofeng's forehead. He couldn't help but look at the nearby Nie Tian. He was very anxious. Why isn't it done yet? Right now, Nie Tian's body was surging with dark energy. They looked like black runes that flowed around his body. He was like a giant whirlpool of darkness that constantly released a dark aura that intimidated the soul. His consciousness was weakening bit by bit. His eyes were slowly turning dark like a dark abyss. The heart of darkness in his body was in a state of extension. It filled his entire body with an extremely violent aura of darkness. Niebrat's martial body is too fucking strong. Fat Cat's expression was almost blank as he exclaimed in his heart. He hadn't expected Nie Tian's martial body to be so strong that it could completely extend the Heart of Darkness. Although the Heart of Darkness was only one of the 3 forms of darkness, it was not the complete origin energy of darkness. But Nie Tian was only a mid-paramount god. The power of the stars is indeed terrifying. After much thought, Fat Cat felt that the power that could make Nie Tian endure the Heart of Darkness must be the power of the stars. Nie Tian had long since become one with the Primal Star Stone. His body was filled with immense star energy. It seemed that star power could suppress the origin of darkness to a certain extent. Otherwise, a mid-paramount god wouldn't be able to withstand the Heart of Gloom in its extended form. But now, the most troublesome thing was that under the powerful impact of the Heart of Darkness, Nie Tian's consciousness was slowly weakening. If he lost control of his mind, he might trigger the power of the God Fiend nascent embryo. The Heart of Darkness and the God Fiend nascent embryo both contained powerful darkness-type energy. The 2 forces exploded at the same time, mutually reinforcing each other. The resulting power was simply unimaginable. If that happened, Nie Tian's martial body wouldn't be able to withstand it. He would most likely explode and die. The Heart of Darkness is too strong, Fat Cat said. How much of Nie Tian's consciousness will remain depends on how strong his heart is. She couldn't hide the worry on her face. Roar! Just then, 7 kills roared out once more. The killing intent on his body grew even thicker. Moving his body, he threw out a violent punch toward the crowd. Boom! The shadow of the fist was like a mountain as it arrived. The boundless aura created a huge wave as it charged towards Lin Fan with the intention to kill. Lian Jiofeng retreated immediately. He was so heavily injured that he couldn't block 7 kills punch. Nangong Lin and the others were scared out of their wits. They stood rooted to the ground, motionless, and their eyes glazed over. Jun Aoqing's eyes flashed. She turned around and stabbed her sword forward. A sword image hundreds of meters long appeared, and a huge vortex formed in the water. She wanted to use the space-time sword image to block 7 kills punch. Bang! However, the instant the fist shadow landed, a muffled sound was heard and the sword shadow was shattered. Ah! Jun Aoqing screamed when she felt the powerful impact. She was sent flying. In an instant, she felt waves of incomparably ferocious power smashing down on her. Shocking cracks appeared on her body, and fresh blood immediately gushed out. She was completely covered in blood. Her strength and sword intent were very strong, but she also had a fatal weakness. Her martial body was too weak. This level of impact was completely unbearable for her. QL11 between life and death. Jun Aoqing felt like her body was about to be torn apart. A face appeared in her mind. It was Nie Tian. Nie Tian. Jun Aoqing's mouth twitched with difficulty. She shouted with all her strength. She felt that this might be the last time she would shout his name. In an instant, she felt despair. It was as if she had fallen into a bottomless abyss and was about to be completely drowned. However, at this moment, an extremely angry roar rang out. Don't hurt her! In the next moment, a dark force enveloped her and formed a dark shield that enveloped Jun Aoqing. Nie Tian. Jun Aoqing felt the tearing force around her disappear. She couldn't help but turn around. A dark figure was standing behind her like a mountain. Although the figure was enveloped by a terrifying dark aura, June Ouching could still tell that it was Nietian. At this moment, Nietian's aura was extremely terrifying. It was as majestic as a mountain and as vast as the sea. The dark aura surged and condensed into dark magical symbols that circulated around Nietian's body. They formed a dark armor and turned him into a dark giant. Nietian's eyes were as dark as an abyss. However, a bright light flashed in the depths of his eyes. It was as clear as water and as brilliant as the stars. Bang! In the next instant, the extreme killing fist landed, but it was blocked by the dark shield. Nietian moved and caught June Ouching. He said softly, "Ouching, are you all right?" June Ouching was stunned. She subconsciously shook her head. The dark energy surged around her, but it didn't harm her. She couldn't understand why Nietian would become like this. "Enter the 9 extremities first. Leave this killing machine to me." Nietian smiled faintly and sent June Ouching into the 9 extremities. Then, his eyes darkened and locked on his 7 kills cold. "This?" Lion Jiufeng looked at Nietian with an extremely strange gaze. He said in shock, "How is this possible?" He knew that the Yuan inhibiting pill had allowed Nietian to release the power of the Heart of Darkness, but he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Why was Nietian's mind completely clear? The attack of the Heart of Darkness hadn't affected Nietian's mind at all. Chapter 24:17. Nietian was completely awake. Lion Jiufeng stared at Nietian in disbelief. He could not believe what he was seeing. The power of the Heart of Darkness had been unleashed. Even if Nietian's martial body could withstand it, he should have lost control of his mind. However, at this moment, Nietian was completely clear-headed, which was too strange. "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Lion Jiufeng cried out in his mind. His expression changed rapidly. 7 kills, is it? At this moment, Nietian did not have the time to care about Lion Jiufeng at all. His abyss-like eyes shone with a cold light as he locked on his 7 kills and said in a deep voice, "I'd like to see just how powerful your heaven-punishing form is." At this time, the Heart of Darkness in Nietian's body was stimulated by the Yuan inhibiting pill and was in a state of expansion. His strength had not increased, but he could clearly feel his aura had increased by a dozen times, or even dozens of times. He could feel that there was a wild power of darkness surging violently inside his body. It was as if he possessed inexhaustible power. Nietian could vaguely feel that he could control this power of darkness at will. Earlier, he could clearly feel that his consciousness was slowly being devoured by the power of darkness. But in this moment of danger, a power seemed to awaken from the depths of the god-devil nascent embryo and restore his consciousness. "What is going on?" Fat Cat's figure sounded. He also had a look of disbelief. He thought that Nietian's consciousness would be devoured by the power of darkness. But the reality was that Nietian was completely awake. Fat Cat could not understand what was going on, but he could vaguely feel that the reason Nietian could remain awake seemed to be related to his god-devil nascent embryo. Roar. At this time, 7 kills let out a low roar. His pitch-black eye sockets seemed to widen. Then he moved and punched out. Wong! The extreme killing fist shadow whistled like a chilly wind, and suddenly appeared, fiercely pressing down on Nietian. The stench of blood in the surrounding space was very thick. Under the stimulation of this stench of blood, 7 Kill's body exploded with even more terrifying power. 7 Kills not only had the extreme killer demon eyes, but he also had the extreme killer demon body. The extreme deathly demon body and extreme deathly demon eyes had a very strange characteristic. The more one was exposed to the smell of blood, the more powerful they would be. Stimulated by the stench of blood, Chi Sha's scaled demon body seemed to expand a little, becoming even crazier and more violent. When the others saw the terrifying punch, they all broke out in cold sweat for Nietian. Nietian was their last hope. If something happened to Nietian, they wouldn't be able to escape. This punch is too weak. But at this moment, Nietian spoke in a cold tone, after which his silhouette flickered as he directly rushed over. The darkness energy around him blossomed, transforming into a beam of black light that enveloped over. In the next moment, a strange scene occurred. The black light flashed through the water and actually devoured the extreme, killing fist shadow completely. Then, like a giant snake, the black light rushed out and hit Chi-Sha's body. Bang! There was a muffled sound, and 7 kills was knocked back several hundred meters. He finally managed to stabilize himself. The sudden scene caused everyone to gasp. They all looked at Nie Tian in shock. Not only had Nie Tian blocked 7 kills punch, he had even forced him back. How was this possible? Everyone's first reaction was that it was impossible. But the truth was the truth. Nie Tian had indeed forced 7 kills back. Why? Lian Zhofeng's eyes focused, and his gaze was extremely strange. He couldn't understand how Nie Tian could control the Heart of Darkness so easily. According to his previous expectations, Nie Tian should be in a state of losing control at this moment. He could vaguely feel that there seemed to be a power inside Nie Tian's body that was helping him control the Heart of Darkness. It was because of the explosive power of the Heart of Darkness that Nie Tian had been able to easily force 7 kills back. Roar! 7 kills steadied himself and let out a furious roar. This was the first time he had been forced back. His entire body was filled with rage, causing the killing intent around him to become even sharper. Nie Tian swept his gaze across 7 kills and smiled cold. He said indifferently, as expected of a killing machine, all you know is to kill. It had to be said that 7 kills killing intent was extremely thick. The killing intent that was about to burst out of his body was enough to make people tremble. However, this kind of killing intent posed no threat to the current Nie Tian. In the next moment, Nie Tian's figure suddenly moved. He turned into a beam of black light and charged forward. 7 kills did not have eyes, but he could feel it. He threw a punch, and the shadow of his fist shot forward. Dark energy circulated around Nie Tian's body, and he shattered the shadow of his fist. He arrived just a few meters away from 7 kills. What is he trying to do? Lian Zhofeng's eyes trembled when he saw how close Nie Tian was to 7 kills. He actually felt a trace of worry. Everyone else's eyes also froze. They were all stunned. In the next moment, Nie Tian threw a punch, and it actually collided with 7 kills' scaled demon fist. Bang! There was a muffled sound. It sounded like metal had collided with stone. 7 kills' figure was sent flying, and he let out a miserable howl. Lian Zhofeng was stunned. His expression was one of extreme shock. Nie Tian had actually clashed with 7 kills' martial physique in his scaled demon form. In the end, Nie Tian's martial physique had crushed 7 kills. Everyone else's expressions froze. They did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. 7 kills steadied himself several hundred meters away. One of his arms was actually dripping with blood. After clashing head-on with Nie Tian, his fist had shattered into a bloody mess. With the Heart of Darkness, Nie Tian's martial physique was ridiculously strong. Mmph. Suddenly, Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. His figure turned into a ray of black light again, and he charged at 7 kills. Bang! 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 In the next moment, black shadows flashed in the air, and a series of muffled sounds rang out. Nie Tian punched 7 kills' body again and again. Every time his fist landed, a bloody hole would be left on Chi-Sha's body. 7 kills' body swayed left and right. He was completely a human sandbag. He could not fight back at all, and he could only stand there and take the beating. Hiss! When everyone saw the scene before them, they could not believe their eyes as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Nie Tian's method was simple and violent, but it was terrifyingly strong. 7 kills was bloodthirsty, but Nie Tian was even more bloodthirsty than 7 kills. Lian Zhofeng was completely stunned. His expression was blank, and his mouth was slightly open as if he wanted to say something, but he could not. He had not expected things to turn out like this. His original plan was to use Nie Tian, who was out of control, to control 7 kills. But the scene before him had far exceeded his expectations. It was out of his control. 7 kills was already very strong. He had killed the Golden Flame ancestral dragon in the blink of an eye. Yet Tion was even stronger. He was completely torturing 7 kills. QL 11. Chapter 24:18. Bang, bang, bang. Deep in the water, muffled sounds kept coming out. Beams of black light rained down, leaving bloody holes on Chisha's body. In the blink of an eye, Chisha's entire body was a bloody mess. 7 kills trembled slightly. He seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The murderous aura around him was slowly weakening, and so was the aura around him. He won't really beat 7 kills to death, will he? Nangong Lin and the others thought with trembling eyes. Nietian, stop fighting. Suddenly, a wail rang. It was Lian Jiofeng's voice. Not enough. Nietian turned around slightly and looked cold at Lian Jiofeng. He said indifferently, Lian Jiofeng, 7 kills killed your Golden Flame ancestral dragon. Don't you want revenge? After saying this, Nietian's body shook, and several rays of black light surged out of his body. They locked onto 7 kills like iron chains. Nietian, have you gone mad? Lian Jiofeng shouted when he saw this. He shouted, Are you really going to kill 7 kills? Nietian's actions were far beyond Lian Jiofeng's expectations. If Nietian used a little more force, those rays of black light would be enough to tear 7 kills' body apart. After a series of cruel punches, 7 kills' body had become very weak. Even his scaled demon body could not endure it. Nietian had originally come to save 7 kills, but his current actions clearly showed that he wanted to kill 7 kills. Lian Jiofeng, I am sorry. Nietian swept his gaze across Lian Jiofeng, the corner of his lips curling into a strange smile. Lian Jiofeng's eyes shook when he heard Nietian's words. He was extremely shocked. He had said the same thing to Nietian before. But when he wanted to catalyze the energy suppression pill and cause the heart of darkness in Nietian's body to explode, he had said sorry to Nietian. At this time, Nietian also apologized to him. Could it be that Nietian wanted to kill Chisha because of this matter? Nietian, don't kill him. Lian Jiofeng reacted in an instant and yelled. His voice had turned piercing. Unfortunately, it was too late. Break. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. With a low growl, the rays of light that were wrapped around Chisha's body suddenly moved and instantly spread out in all directions. Bam! In an instant, Chisha's body was pulled by a powerful force and was torn apart. Countless black scales shot into the water, and an incomparably bloody aura spread out, surging in the space. Chisha's body was completely covered in blood. He looked like a person who had been skinned alive. The incomparably bloody scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble. Their expressions were filled with extreme shock. But in the next instant, Nietian suddenly moved and appeared next to Chisha. The power of the Earth's source surged out of his body, and waves of life energy flowed into Chisha's body. Then, new skin actually grew on Chisha's bloody body. His body was also slowly shrinking. Lian Jiofeng and the others were stunned by the scene in front of them. They couldn't make a sound for a long time. QL11, it was obvious that Nietian didn't want to kill Chisha. He wanted to save him. A moment later, Chisha's body gradually returned to normal size. New skin grew on his body. It was no longer the skin of a scaled demon, but the skin of a human. Chisha had gone from a scaled demon to a human after being beaten by Nietian. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. It was like a dream. It was inconceivable. Lian Jiofeng was stunned. It took him a long time to come to his senses. At that moment, he finally understood why Nietian had beaten 7 kills so brutally. Nietian had wanted to tear off Chisha's scales. Those scales contained the runes of the scaled demon's evil arts. It was precisely because the runes on his scales had been torn off that Chisha had returned to his original appearance. However, Nietian's method was far too brutal. If he had used the same method on anyone else, they would have died a long time ago. Only Chisha, who possessed the veins of 3 lives, possessed such powerful vitality that he didn't die immediately after his scales were torn off. Nietian had taken a risk. He did not know if Qi Sha would be able to survive after he tore off the scales from his body. Fortunately, he had won the gamble. If he really had killed Qi Sha just now, he didn't know what Lian Jiufeng would have done. He's fine now. A moment later, Niet Tian smiled faintly. His forehead was covered in sweat. He had used up a lot of the Earth Source's power to save Qi Sha. Qi Sha's vitality was too strong. Not even the Earth Source could satisfy him. Right now, Qi Sha's aura was very weak, but his life was no longer in danger. Niet Tian scanned Qi Sha with his consciousness and frowned slightly. He couldn't sense Qi Sha's strength at all. But right now, Qi Sha was absolutely safe. Judging from Qi Sha's aura, he would need a very long time to recover completely. Not enough. But at this time, Lian Jiufeng suddenly growled and slammed his palm into Nangong Ling's body. Everything happened too suddenly. Nangong Ling wasn't prepared at all. He was sent flying. Lian Jiufeng's lips twitched. He reached out and forcefully pulled out a purple whirlpool from Nangong Ling's body. Purple thunder 9 howls. Niet Tian's eyes focused. He immediately realized that Lian Jiufeng had taken out of Nangong Ling's body. It was the purple thunder 9 howls. But in the next moment, he frowned in shock. Nangong Ling had fused with the purple thunder 9 howls for so long. How could Lian Jiufeng take it out so easily? Just as Niet Tian was feeling bewildered, another shocking scene took place. Lian Jiufeng suddenly thrust his palm forward. A cluster of runes surged out of his palm and turned into a whirlpool. Xinyuan Yunsong seemed to sense something at this moment. He suddenly let out a cry and shook his body. A white whirlpool appeared. It was the storm's pole inside his body. Lian Jiufeng smiled cold. Then, 2 black whirlpools appeared in his hands. They were a pair of demon eyes of extreme slaughter. Lian Jiufeng, what are you doing? Niet Tian cried out in shock when he saw this. Lian Jiufeng had taken out Nangong Ling and Xinyuan Yunsong's origin energy instantly. He was clearly prepared. Then, he took out the demon eyes of extreme slaughter. What was he trying to do? You'll find out soon enough. Lian Jiufeng's lips curled into a strange smile. Then, a shocking scene occurred. Lian Jiufeng raised his hands. His demon eyes of extreme slaughter actually accepted the origin energy at the same time. Of the 2 demon eyes of extreme slaughter, one had merged with the purple thunder 9 howls origin energy, and the other with the storm's pole origin energy. Strangely enough, the origin energy and the demon eyes of extreme slaughter did not reject each other at all. They merged together instantly. Niet Tian's pupils abruptly shrank. He was stunned by the scene before him. He never imagined that Lian Jiufeng would merge the demon eyes of extreme slaughter and origin energy together. Chapter 2419. Lian Jiufeng's sudden action stunned Niet Tian. He hadn't thought that Lian Jiufeng would do something so shocking. The supreme killing demon was a terrifying thing to begin with. How terrifying would it be now that he had fused 2 origin powers into it? It was clear that Lian Jiufeng had planned everything from the start. The reason he had brought Nangong Lin and Xinyuan Yunsong with him was for the origin powers in their bodies. The reason he could extract the origin powers so easily was because he had prepared everything beforehand. Niet Tian had seen a strange rune whirlpool appear in Lian Jiufeng's palm. It was probably a rune that could easily steal origin powers. Nangong Lin and Xinyuan Yunsong were completely stunned. They stared at Lian Jiufeng blankly. They couldn't even react. What do you think you're doing, Lian Jiufeng? Niet Tian stared at Lian Jiufeng coldly. He finally understood why Lian Jiufeng had requested for Niet Qingwan to come with him. It was clear that he wanted to obtain Niet Qingwan's light origin power as well. Unfortunately, Niet Tian had allowed Niet Qingwan to enter the 9 extreme world. This is just the beginning of what I want to do. Lian Jiufeng smiled coldly. The supreme killing demon is still a little weak right now. It cannot absorb origin powers that are too strong. But the earth vein source in your body is just right. Lian Jiufeng thrust his palm forward. A strange rune whirlpool appeared in his palm again. QL11 in the blink of an eye. The magical symbol vortex released an invisible force that directly enveloped Nietion. Nietion frowned, confusion filling his face. He didn't feel anything. Everything was normal inside him. How is this possible? Lian Jiufeng was stunned. Why are the 9 origin runes useless on you? The rune he used was called the 9 origin rune. It was a secret art of the ancient Ming race that could absorb 9 origin powers. However, it was very difficult to form the 9 origin rune. Lian Jiufeng had gone to great lengths to create these 9 origin runes. It was all for this moment. But now, his 9 origin runes were useless against Nietion. How could he accept this? Lian Jiufeng could accept it if the 9 origin rune was unable to steal the Heart of Darkness. After all, the Heart of Darkness was too powerful. However, the earth vein source in Nietion's body was clearly only a small portion of the essence of earth. Why was the 9 origins talisman completely ineffective against it? Lian Jiufeng could not understand what was going on at all. How was Nietion able to resist the 9 origin runes? Nietion stared blankly at Lian Jiufeng for a moment. Then he smiled cold. Lian Jiufeng, I didn't know you even wanted my earth vein source. Lian Jiufeng's thoughts did not surprise Nietion too much. What really surprised him was the supreme killing demon eye. It seemed like the supreme killing demon eye could not only fuse with one kind of origin energy, but could also fuse with several kinds of origin energy at the same time. Lian Jiufeng's eyes trembled. He looked at Nietion with undisguisable shock. Nietion's current strength was extremely terrifying. Even 7 kills had been beaten by Nietion. Lian Jiufeng was no match for Nietion. Supreme killing demon eye. But at this moment, the half-conscious 7 kills suddenly let out a strange cry. Then, the supreme killing demon eye on Lian Jiufeng's palm actually shook violently. Nietion frowned slightly. He immediately felt the supreme killing demon eye become violent. In the next instant, the supreme killing demon eye flew out like black lightning and entered 7 kills eye sockets. In an instant, the supreme killing demon eye had recognized its master. Boom, boom, boom. 7 kills eyes unleashed a violent, dark aura of extreme killing. Chisha's figure suddenly rose violently. The murderous aura around him increased exponentially. Waves of murderous aura surged in the water like sharp blades. Z. A piercing sound rang out from the water. It was as if space itself was being torn apart by the killing intent. Nietion was stunned. His gaze locked onto 7 kills. He could actually feel the space around 7 kills being torn apart bit by bit. A spatial door was slowly forming. Nietion, don't attack. Lian Jiufeng's eyes trembled. He reacted abruptly, his expression changing as he cried out. Nietion frowned, but then he laughed. He immediately understood what 7 kills was doing. Right now, 7 kills was using the supreme killing demon eye to tear apart space. He wanted to force his way out of the dark sea hell. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Piercing sounds and loud explosions rang out from the water. The violent extreme killing chi formed terrifying waves in the water. Slowly, a giant whirlpool formed. The surrounding space was collapsing towards the center of the whirlpool. What a terrifying demon eye of extreme killing. Nietion couldn't help but exclaim inwardly, his eyes trembling when he saw this. Under 7 kills control, the supreme killing demon eye could tear apart space. One had to know that the space in the water was a folded space. Even Jun Ouching couldn't create such a terrifying space-time whirlpool. Lian Jiufeng's eyes were trembling. He seemed extremely nervous. He knew that the reason the supreme killing demon eye was so terrifying was because it had activated the extreme power of the eye when it had just acknowledged him as its master. Under normal circumstances, the supreme killing demon eye couldn't unleash such terrifying power. At the very least, 7 kills couldn't unleash the true power of the supreme killing demon I with his current strength. 7 kills wanted to use the power of the supreme killing demon I to escape the dark sea hell. Rumble. A moment later, an even more terrifying explosion rang out from the water. The space-time whirlpool grew larger and larger, and the aura of space-time thickened. It's almost done. Lian Jiofeng's eyes trembled with excitement when he saw the space-time whirlpool slowly forming. He hadn't thought that everything would go so smoothly. All they needed to do was wait for 7 kills to complete the space-time whirlpool, and they would be able to leave this place. But at this moment, Nye Tian frowned, and his expression abruptly changed. He suddenly noticed that there was someone else hiding in the water. Who is it? Get out here. Nye Tian growled. His figure moved, and the power of darkness around him exploded. He turned into a streak of black light that shot toward a certain part of the water. Bang! Following this, a muffled sound could be heard from the water. Following this, a figure appeared from the dark space. This figure was very sinister. He had been hiding all this time. He clearly wanted to destroy the space-time whirlpool at the most crucial moment and prevent Nye Tian and the others from leaving the dark sea hell. The figure that had suddenly appeared stood still and stared coldly at Nye Tian. He said solemnly, "The demon god, nascent embryo, is indeed different." Nye Tian looked at the figure in front of him and frowned. He was stunned. Chapter 24:20. Li Juhan, it really is Li Juhan. Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He was absolutely sure that the person in front of him was Li Juhan. The same appearance, the same aura, and even the same cold eyes. Even twins could not be so similar. Nye Tian could not believe that the person in front of him was Li Juhan. He had seen with his own eyes that Li Juhan's body had exploded from the backlash of the supreme, killing demon eye. But why was the person in front of him Li Juhan? Could it be that the backlash of the supreme, killing demon eye did not kill him? How is this possible? On the other side, Lian Jiofeng cried out in shock as he looked at the figure in front of him. You aren't you dead? Nangong Lin also reacted. His teeth were chattering, and he stuttered. Everyone had seen Li Juhan's death with their own eyes. Why would Li Juhan appear now? Nye Tian could only think of 2 explanations. One was that Li Juhan was not dead, and the other was that Li Juhan's clone had died. The possibility of the first explanation was almost zero. The backlash of the supreme killing demon I was too strong, and Li Juhan's body had exploded. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for him to survive. The latter explanation was also not very likely. Nye Tian and Li Juhan had fought several times, but he could not tell that the latter was a clone. Demon God Yuan embryo, are you surprised to see me? The figure spoke at this time. Even his voice was exactly the same as Li Juhan's. Who are you? Nye Tianling asked coldly. He could instantly tell that the person was not Li Juhan. Even though this person's appearance and aura were exactly the same as Li Juhan's, he was definitely not Li Juhan. If it was Li Juhan, he would not call him Demon God Yuan embryo. Moreover, the person in front of him seemed to be slightly stronger than Li Juhan. The light in his eyes was also sharper than Li Juhan's. I am Li Qi. Li Qi said indifferently. The Li Juhan you killed had another name, Li Jiao. At this moment, the person who appeared in front of Nye Tian and the others was none other than Li Qi, the person by the Dark Emperor's side. Li Jiao. Nye Tian frowned and asked coldly, what is your relationship with Li Jiao? What's the point of knowing the answer to a dead man's question? Li Qi laughed, and the coldness in his eyes became even colder. Eyebrows furrowed. Nye Tian said with a cold smile, do you really think you can kill me with your strength? I couldn't before, but I can now. Li Qi sneered and said in a deep voice, the heart of darkness in your body has slowly stabilized. How much strength do you still have now? Nye Tian narrowed his eyes, and his expression changed slightly. He could feel that the heart of darkness in his body was slowly stabilizing. His whole body's aura was becoming weaker and weaker. My strength is enough to kill you. The next moment, Nye Tian's eyes focused, and he sneered. Then, he moved and slashed with his sword. Boom! The sword shadow whizzed out and headed straight for Li Qi. Li Qi seemed to have anticipated that Nie Tian would make a move, and thus reacted instantly. His figure flashed, and he dodged the incoming sword shadow. Then he thrust his palm out, and an extremely violent force smashed the sword shadow. "You want to kill me with this kind of strength?" Li Qi steadied his body and sneered. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Nie Tian frowned and was slightly surprised. He sensed that Li Qi's aura was very strange. It seemed to be some kind of dark attribute aura, but it was mixed with some kind of attribute power. "Boy, without the support of the Heart of Darkness, you are nothing in front of me." At this moment, Li Qi sneered. He moved and struck with his palm. Splash! In the water, a giant black wooden hand appeared like a ghost claw, grabbing at Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He was not afraid at all. The sword essence in his body surged out and merged with the dark force around him. It turned into a dark sword shadow and rushed out. Boom! The moment the giant black wooden hand and the dark sword shadow collided, there was a loud explosion. The two forces collapsed at the same time. Nie Tian and Li Qi's figures retreated 100 meters at the same time and stabilized at the same time. "Boy, interesting." Li Qi suddenly stopped and stared at Nie Tian coldly. He said in a deep voice, "I didn't expect you to be so proficient in controlling the sword essence. You can even merge it with the dark force. The interesting part is yet to come." Nie Tianling sneered. His face was calm, but he was terrified. He faintly felt that there was a hidden force in his body that was slowly becoming stronger. The aura of this force was very strange. It did not seem to be Nie Tian's own force at all. What was even more strange was that this force was self-generated and was not under Nie Tian's control at all. "It's this force." At this moment, Fat Cat's scream was heard in Nie Tian's divine sense. QL 11 Nie Tian frowned. He did not understand why Fat Cat was so excited. "Nie Tian, it's this force that allowed you to stay awake when the Heart of Darkness exploded." Fat Cat was very excited and said with trembling eyes. When Nie Tian heard Fat Cat's words, his face changed slightly. He suddenly remembered something. Previously, when the power of the Heart of Darkness exploded, his spiritual consciousness had suffered a huge impact. Just when his divine sense was about to collapse, a force appeared and protected his divine sense, allowing him to stay awake. That force seemed to be some kind of sealing force that was hidden deep in his body. At this moment, it was slowly awakening. Nie Tian was very confused. Why would this force suddenly awaken? Also, where did this force come from? Earlier, this force had protected Nie Tian's divine sense from the attack of the Heart of Darkness. But now, this force was actually stimulating the power of the gods and demons inside Nie Tian's body. Nie Tian could feel the power of the gods and demons inside his body slowly awakening. The sea of gods and demons inside his nascent fetus space seemed to boil and become restless. All of a sudden, Li Qi sensed that Nie Tian's aura was skyrocketing. He couldn't help but frown, his face filled with astonishment. The Heart of Darkness slowly calmed down. Nie Tian's aura should have returned to normal. So why was it growing stronger and stronger? Lian Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian and felt the violent aura that was about to burst out of his body. He couldn't help but be stunned. He said in a daze, "How is this possible?" He had never expected that Nie Tian would actually be able to unleash such a terrifying power. Right now, Nie Tian's aura was skyrocketing. He looked like a towering tree that was brimming with vitality. Nie Tian himself was extremely shocked. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He sensed that the slumbering power within the god-fiend nascent embryo seemed to be awakening, and he could feel a vast and boundless majestic power. But he had no idea what was going on. Chapter 24-21. Boom, boom, boom. Li Qi's black energy surged like a raging wave. His aura became stronger and stronger. Then, a shocking scene occurred. Crack, 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 crack. Li Qi's body suddenly exploded with a tearing sound. It was as if a seed was growing in an instant. His limbs and body had all changed, and he had actually grown into a giant black tree. The thick branches danced wildly in the water like a giant black snake. Rumble! The water around them rumbled. The entire sea was shaking violently, as if it was about to boil. Nyetian felt Li Qi's aura and frowned. He was puzzled. He was not surprised by the change in Li Qi's body. What surprised him the most was Li Qi's aura. It was a very strange aura. It seemed to be some kind of dark aura, but it was mixed with a vast elemental aura. What's wrong with this guy? Why did he suddenly turn into a giant tree? Nangong Lin's eyes trembled as he said in shock. Lai and Jiufeng and the others were also shocked. The change in Li Qi's body was really strange. His aura had increased several times, and his strength had increased a lot. Kid with the origin embryo of the fiend god die. At this moment, Li Qi's body of black wood was fully unleashed. It was thousands of meters tall. He spoke in a deep voice. Then, his tree trunk lashed at Nyetian like a long whip. Just as the tree trunk was about to fall, Nyetian raised his head and casually struck out with his palm. Fiend god energy surged out and condensed into a giant hand that directly grabbed the black tree trunk. This power is too weak, Nye Tianling said coldly. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Bang! In the next moment, he exerted force and tore the blackwood trunk in half. Li Qi's huge blackwood body instantly retreated. The branches on his body waved violently, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. However, he was shocked at this moment. He said in a trembling voice, "Kid, why are you so strong?" He hadn't expected that his body of blackwood would still be so weak in front of Nyetian. Nyetian's strength was too strong. His blackwood body was almost torn apart by the force. "Don't you know that I have a god fiend, nascent embryo?" Nye Tianling sneered, the coldness in his eyes intensifying. In fact, he was even more shocked than Li Qi. He could sense that the power of the 9,000 god fiends and his god fiend, nascent embryo, had all awakened. Although he couldn't wield the god fiend power to the extreme, the violent god fiend aura was enough for him to beat Li Qi up. He did not know why the power of 9,000 fiend gods had suddenly awakened. He only felt that there was an uncontrollable force in his body that was helping him awaken the power of the god fiend. This is the power of the fiend god, nascent embryo. Li Qi cried out in horror. His huge blackwood body couldn't help but tremble, and the surrounding water layer was restless. What's the point of talking so much to someone who's going to die? Nye Tianling laughed. He moved, and terrifying god-fiend power surged out of his body. At the same time, Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hand, and his sword intent surged like the sea. The surging sword intent merged with the god-fiend power completely, forming a terrifying god-fiend sword intent. Human sword star slash. Nye Tian's figure was like a sword. He stood in the water, and his lips twitched. He roared and slashed with his sword. Boom! In an instant, a 2,000-meter-long god-fiend sword shadow appeared. It pressed down on Li Qi like a mad dragon. Buzz! The moment the sword intent burst out, a clear sword hum resounded. It was like the roar of a giant beast in the water, and thousands of waves were stirred up. Rumble! Rumble! In the water layer, endless waves surged under the sword intent. They roared and churned violently. How terrifying! Lai and Jiufeng and the others were shocked to see this. They were forced to retreat by the sword intent. The strength Nye Tian had displayed at this moment was simply too terrifying. That kind of boundless sword intent, that kind of berserk imposing manner, caused one to be shocked and terrified. It was hard to imagine how a middle-stage paramount god could have such terrifying power. Li Qi felt the boundless sword intent pressing down on him. He let out a strange cry, but he couldn't say anything else. He had once said that Nye Tian was a dead man, but now he couldn't even fight back in front of Nye Tian. It was so ironic when Nye Tian said the same thing. Boom! Bang! 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 In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and an explosion was heard, followed by a series of tearing sounds. The huge black tree figure retreated with a loud bang. The huge branches were instantly shattered by the destructive sword intent. Bang! Finally, with a muffled sound, Li Qi's figure hit a giant reef, and the reef collapsed. QL 11-inch this. The others gasped at the sight. They were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Who would have thought that Nie Tian's strength would be so terrifying? One sword strike. It was only one strike, but it had sent Li Qi flying, seriously injured him, and forced him back to his original form. Is this the power of the fiend god origin embryo? A long time later, Lian Jiufeng rolled his eyes and thought in shock. Right now, Nie Tian was a middle-stage paramount god with the power of 9,000 god devils. He could easily crush Li Qi, who was close to the peak god realm. If Nie Tian reached the peak paramount god level, his battle prowess would be unimaginably terrifying. Nie Tian stood rooted to the ground. Although his expression was calm, he was inwardly shaken. He had not expected the power of 9,000 demons and gods to be so terrifying with a single slash. Neither Lian Jiufeng nor Nie Tian had a clear understanding of the god-devil nascent embryo. The power that Nie Tian was displaying right now was only a fraction of the god-devil nascent embryo's power. The true terror of the god-devil nascent embryo was only apparent when one reached the saint realm. Nie Tian's path to the god-devil nascent embryo had only just begun. Boom! At this moment, a loud explosion sounded. All right. Then, Qisha's voice rang out coldly. Leave! Lian Jiufeng and Nie Tian turned around at the same time and saw a giant space-time vortex appear in the water. It was obvious that 7 kills had created a complete space-time vortex. With his space-time vortex, Nie Tian and the others would be able to leave the dark sea onyx prison. Let's go. Lian Jiufeng did not hesitate at all. With a growl, he charged toward the space-time whirlpool. Nangong Lin and Xianyuan Yunsong reacted and charged toward the space-time vortex at the same time. Even though Lian Jiufeng had taken away their origin power, he hadn't killed them. Most importantly, they didn't want to stay in the dark sea onyx prison any longer. At that moment, Yang Qi turned to Nie Tian and said with a burning look in his eyes, "Let's go, Lord Nie Tian." Although he was from the Dark Sea Onyx prison, he didn't want to stay here any longer. Now that he had a chance to leave the Dark Sea Onyx prison, how could he let it go? Chapter 24-22. Nie Tian's figure flashed as he charged towards the space-time vortex. Since Qi Sha had been rescued, the Dark Ocean hunt had lost its purpose. There was no need for him to stay in the Dark Ocean prison any longer. However, it was a pity that he had yet to meet the legendary Dark Emperor, Godfiend Vital Fetus. Just then, a deep voice was heard. Nie Tian's pupils contracted as he turned around and fixed his eyes on a blood-colored figure. It was none other than Li Qi. Even though Li Qi had sustained heavy injuries after taking a direct hit from Nie Tian, he hadn't died. Humph! Nie Tianling sneered. He ignored Li Qi and was about to leave. However, Li Qi opened his mouth and uttered a name. Qi Wu Yunxiao. Qi Wu Yunxiao. When Nie Tian heard the name, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He exclaimed, "What did you say?" Qi Wu Yunxiao was the name of Nie Tian's mother. At that moment, Li Qi had uttered the name. I said, "Qi Wu Yunxiao." Li Qi said in a deep voice, and there was a strange light in his eyes. How do you know this name? Nie Tian's eyes were slightly red, and he roared like a wild beast. He had never expected Li Qi to say Qi Wu Yunxiao's name at that moment, because this person is imprisoned in the Dark Ocean prison. Li Qi said word by word. His lips curled into a cold and murderous smile, and his blood-red body was trembling uncontrollably. In an instant, Nie Tian felt the qi and blood in his body flow in the opposite direction, and a violent force was rampaging in his body. What did you say? He roared and pounced towards Li Qi like a wild beast. Upon seeing this, Yang Qi couldn't help but exclaim, "Lord Nie Tian." The space-time vortex was becoming smaller and was about to close. If Nie Tian did not come in now, he would not have a chance to leave the Dark Ocean prison. The Dark Sea Black Prison was a huge cage. There weren't many opportunities to leave this place. However, Nie Tian ignored Yang Qi and dashed towards Li Qi like a wild beast. What did you say? Make yourself clear. Nie Tian moved like lightning and appeared next to Li Qi. He stretched out his hand and lifted Li Qi up. Godfiend vital fetus, you heard me clearly. Li Qi was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled and said coldly, Your mother, Qi Wu Yun Xiao, is imprisoned in the dark sea dark prison. His voice wasn't loud, but it was very clear. It was like a clap of thunder that resounded in Nie Tian's ears, causing him to go blank. In the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes turned bloodshot as he roared like a berserk beast. Where are you? Godfiend, vital fetus, do you want to stay and save your mother? Li Qi was not afraid. He laughed again and said crazily, Your mother is imprisoned in the most secure place in the dark ocean prison. Do you know how much she has suffered all these years? If you saw her now, you would definitely regret having such a mother. Ha ha ha. At the end of his speech, Li Qi actually laughed maniacally like a devil that had walked out of hell. Bastard. Upon hearing Li Qi's words, Nie Tian was instantly enraged. With a wild roar, he threw a punch at Li Qi's chest. Bang! With a muffled sound, Li Qi felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on his chest. The sudden attack caused his body to tremble and his sternum to break. Speak. Where? Nie Tian seemed to have gone mad as he roared furiously. Godfiend vital fetus, you will never be able to save Qi Wu Yunxiu. You will never be able to see her again. Ha ha, cough, cough, cough. Li Qi's voice was trembling and weak. He wanted to laugh, but ended up coughing. Bang! Nie Tian's eyes flickered with ferocity. He threw a punch at Li Qi's face. Li Qi's vision darkened and several teeth were sent flying. Lian Jiufeng was completely dumbfounded when he saw this. Nie Tian's attack was not the attack of a paramount god martial artist. It was more like a street thug beating someone up. However, the violent aura Nie Tian exuded was so terrifying that even the water in the surroundings seemed to be trembling and restless. Lord Nie Tian, come back. It's too late. Yang Qi looked at Nie Tian and shouted. The space-time vortex was disappearing. If Nie Tian didn't come back, he would not have a chance to leave. Nie Tian couldn't care about anything else. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and his expression was crazy. He was like a beast. Speak, speak. Nie Tian roared madly as the dark aura around him surged like a tsunami, making him look like a fiend that had just walked out of hell. Kill me. You will never have a chance to see Qi Wu again, Li Qi said with difficulty. His eyes were gradually losing their luster. The reason why he had mentioned Qi Wu's cloud sleeve at the last moment was because he wanted Nie Tian to stay. Nie Tian was the god fiend vital fetus. He was very important to the Dark Emperor. As long as Nie Tian stayed, Li Qi would die without regrets. I'll crush you. Nie Tian roared furiously, sounding like the roar of a wild beast. Bang, 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 bang. Then, as if he had gone mad, Nie Tian punched out again and again, giving rise to non-stop muffled sounds. Blood splashed everywhere. Li Qi's body gradually collapsed, and soon became a pile of meat paste. In the space-time vortex, the others stared at Nie Tian as if they were looking at a demon. At this moment, the dark aura emanating from Nie Tian was so intense that he seemed to have turned into a dark abyss, exuding a frigid aura. Nie Tian stood where he was. There was a fierce light in his eyes. Lord Nie Tian, come back. Yang Qi's voice sounded again, but Nie Tian didn't seem to hear it. He had just found out that his mother was imprisoned in the Dark Sea Black Prison. QL11, how could he leave at this time? Let him stay. All of a sudden, 7 Kills looked at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice, he defeated me once. I believe he'll find a way to leave. Lian Jiufeng frowned slightly. He glanced at 7 Kills, but didn't say anything. Qisha couldn't conceal the killing intent in his eyes as he looked at Nie Tian. After 7 Kills came back to life, the person he hated the most was Nie Fenghua. It was because Nie Fenghua defeated him, imprisoned him in the Wind and Cloud Alliance, and then imprisoned him in the Dark Sea Prison. Even now, the glaring slave word on his face was still there. Now, he had another person he hated the most, and that was Nietian. Although Nietian saved his life, he had also defeated him. Other than bloodthirst, Seven Kills had another trait, and that was that he could not tolerate failure. Anyone who had defeated him before, he must kill them. A moment later, the space-time vortex closed, and Seven Kills and the others disappeared completely. Chapter 24-23. At the bottom of the dark sea, a figure stood there. His entire body was surging with a faint dark aura. It was Nietian. His gaze gradually became calm, but his eyes were still filled with a chilling coldness that made people shudder. Nietian, have you calmed down? Fat Cat's voice rang out. Nietian let out a deep breath and nodded. After venting his anger, he had already regained his composure. He was still thinking about his mother, but his emotions were no longer as agitated. He was provoked by the sudden news and provoked by Li Qi. That was why he was completely enraged. Right now, he was already much better. He did not leave with Qi Sha and the rest, because he wanted to stay and save his mother. Nietian swore that no matter where Qi Yunxiu was imprisoned, he would definitely rescue her. If he could not rescue his mother, he would never leave the Dark Sea prison. It's good to calm down, Fat Cat said. He knew that Nietian was very sad, but there were some things that he had to say. Nietian, I'm afraid that the Dark Emperor is very interested in your God-fiend embryo. Fat Cat frowned slightly and said with a bitter smile. Li Qi's last words about Qi Yunxiu were obviously to keep Nietian in the Dark Sea prison. Moreover, Li Qi had called Nietian the God-fiend embryo. It was obvious that he was here for the God-fiend embryo. Nietian nodded slightly. He had a strange expression on his face. After he calmed down, he naturally understood these things. However, he was very curious. Since the Dark Emperor wanted his God-fiend embryo, why did he not come personally? Why did he send Li Qi instead? Li Qi was indeed very strong, but he could not be stronger than the Dark Emperor. Wouldn't the Dark Emperor be more confident if he came personally? There was one more thing that Nietian could not figure out. What was the relationship between Li Juhun and Li Qi? Apart from the difference in strength, the two of them were almost identical in every other aspect. It was very strange. Nietian, take a look at Li Qi's body. At this time, Fat Cat seemed to know what Nietian was thinking and said solemnly. Nietian was stunned for a moment. Then, he looked around and locked his eyes on Li Qi's corpse. The scene before him caused him to frown, and he was stunned for a moment. What's going on? Nietian's eyes trembled slightly as he asked in surprise. At this moment, what he saw was not Li Qi's corpse, but a broken piece of dead wood. Li Qi's corpse had turned into a withered tree. I'm afraid that Li Juhun's corpse would have been the same if it hadn't been destroyed. Fat Cat's mouth twitched, and her eyes flickered as she spoke. Fatty, are Li Juhun and Li Qi not human? Nietian's complexion slightly changed as he asked with a frown. Half human, the other half puppet. Fat Cat's gaze was a little strange as she said, Nietian, if I'm not wrong, the Dark Emperor is most likely a martial artist who is fused with the Heart of All Wood. Heart of All Wood? Nietian frowned and had a strange expression on his face. He had never heard of this name before, so he did not know what the Heart of All Wood was. The Heart of All Wood is the power of the wood origin. Fat Cat frowned and said in a deep voice, Wood origin? Nietian's eyes suddenly trembled as he exclaimed. He didn't expect to meet someone who possessed the wood elemental origin here. QL11, and this person who had the wood origin was most likely the Dark Emperor of the Dark Prison. At this time, Fat Cat's figure moved and appeared in front of Nietian. He glanced at Nietian and stared at Li Qi's corpse. He said in a deep voice, The Li Juhun and Li Qi we met are most likely secondary bodies created by the Dark Emperor using the Heart of All Wood. What do you mean? Nietian was stunned and did not understand. Fat Cat's dark blue eyes flashed as she said, The wood origin, the Heart of All Wood, has a strong power of creation. A martial artist who has the Heart of All Wood can create countless secondary bodies. These secondary bodies have the attributes, aura, and other abilities of the main body. but the strength of the secondary bodies is slightly weaker than the main body. Most importantly, these secondary bodies have a part of their own consciousness, but they must follow the orders of the main body. Li Juhun and Li Qi are most likely secondary bodies created by the Dark Emperor. Nie Tian could not help but frown when he heard what Fat Cat said. It was hard to imagine that the heart of all wood had such a heaven-defying ability. It was just that he did not know how many secondary bodies a martial artist with the heart of all wood could create. Li Qi was only a secondary body of the Dark Emperor, but his strength was already close to the peak of the divine state. He did not know how terrifying the real Dark Emperor's strength would be. The fat little cat let out a sigh and said, Nie Tian, I'm afraid the enemy you're facing is much more powerful than you can imagine. It couldn't hide the worry in its eyes as it looked at Nie Tian. No matter what, I must save my mother. Nie Tian's eyes flashed, and he said seriously. Since he already knew that his mother was imprisoned in the Dark Sea prison, he had to rescue his mother no matter the price. Nie Tian, I finally understand where the mysterious force in your body comes from. Fat Cat nodded slightly and said suddenly. Nie Tian frowned and looked at Fat Cat. Previously, there was indeed a mysterious power in his body. That mysterious force was protecting him from the attack of the Heart of Darkness. Then, it stimulated the God-fiend power in his body to awaken. But now, the mysterious force had disappeared. The God-fiend power in his body had returned to normal. Nie Tian was puzzled. Where did this mysterious force come from? It's the power of the seal within your God-fiend embryo. Little Fat Cat's lips curled up slightly as it said solemnly. Huh? Nie Tian was stunned. Then, he thought of something and his expression changed. He had long known that his parents had left a powerful seal in the God-fiend nascent embryo to suppress its aura. However, he had broken the seal before, so he thought that the seal was gone. But now, it seemed that he was wrong. Nie Tian thought about it carefully. The mysterious force did come from the essence embryo space, but it was not the power of the God-fiend essence embryo itself. The only explanation was that someone had left that power in his God-fiend nascent embryo a long time ago. That seal is very unusual. Fat Cat nodded. My guess is that the seal grew with the growth of the God-fiend essence embryo. At this point, little Fat Cat's figure suddenly changed as it said, in fact, I can feel that this seal is even stronger than the 10 ultimate seals. Nie Tian's eyes widened slightly as he went blank for a moment. Then, he said, That's impossible. Are there any seals in this world that are more powerful than the 10 most powerful seals? As far as he knew, the 10 great ultimate seals were the strongest seals in existence. That was why he did not believe Fat Cat when she said that the seal in his body was stronger than the 10 strongest seals. Moreover, he felt that his parents were not that powerful back then. It was impossible for them to set up such a powerful seal. Could it be? At this time, little Fat Cat frowned slightly, and its face suddenly changed, as if it had realized something. Chapter 24:24. Nie Tian could not help but be surprised to see the Fat Cat petrified. He had seen Fat Cat's surprised expression before, but it was rare to see such an expression. After more than 10 seconds, Nie Tian saw that Fat Cat still did not respond, so he could not help but frown and ask, Fat, did you find anything? Fat Cat suddenly woke up, as if waking up from a dream, his eyes still flashing with a horrified look, but he waved his hand and said, No, nothing. Nothing? Nie Tian murmured with a puzzled look, staring at Fat Cat for a long time, but the latter was still a little sluggish and did not recover for a long time. He knew that Fat Cat must have found something, but was unwilling to say it. He was very curious about what shocking discovery Fat Cat had made, for it to have such a reaction. But looking at Fat Cat's expression, he would not say it. Fat, are you okay? Nie Tian could only helplessly ask, the corner of his mouth twitching. No, I'm fine. Fat Cat waved his paw, forced a smile, and said, Actually, I didn't find anything. I was just thinking about some small things. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed. This attempt to cover up was too obvious. But he knew that Fat Cat would not say anything. so he could only shake his head to express his helplessness. At this time, Nyetian had already realized that there were many things that he could not understand, so knowing some things in advance might not be a good thing for him. At the moment, the most important thing for him was to find a way to save his mother. Fat. Why didn't the seal and the celestial demon embryo work before? At this time, Nyetian suddenly thought of this and could not help but ask. Previously, he had also lost control several times, but the seal in his body did not work. This time, when he came to the dark sea dark prison, his divine sense was attacked, and the celestial and demon power was awakened, all because of the power of the seal in his body. This was obviously not a coincidence. The fat cat was much calmer now. She took a deep breath, looked at Nyetian, and asked, Nyetian, how did you feel when the sealing power took effect? Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He thought for a moment and said, when the power of the seal was awakened, I did have a strange feeling. However, the strangest thing is that I feel that the sealing power is not awakening on its own. It's as if it's being secretly controlled by someone. The fat cat twirled its long whiskers as a strange smile appeared on its face. It nodded and said, since you have this feeling, then my judgment is correct. Judgment? What judgment? Nyetian was stunned for a moment and asked in astonishment. Nyetian, I've always felt that someone was secretly controlling the seal in your body. The fat cat's eyes flickered and said, now it seems that it is indeed the case. Hearing the fat cat's words, Nyetian's eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he asked in astonishment, who is controlling the seal in my body? There really was someone controlling the seal in his body. This was something that Nyetian would never have imagined. This was too dangerous for him. QL11, if the person behind it wanted his life, wouldn't he be instantly killed by the power of the seal with just a thought? Thinking of this, Nyetian couldn't help but take a deep breath, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Nyetian, don't worry. The person secretly controlling the seal will never hurt you. The fat cat's eyes swept over Nyetian, and she could tell what he was thinking at a glance. Nyetian's brows furrowed, and he couldn't react for a moment. He asked why, because the person secretly controlling the seal is the one who left it behind. The fat cat's eyes flickered, and she said solemnly. Nyetian's eyes flickered, and he immediately reacted and exclaimed, my mother. Fat cat's meaning was clear. The person secretly controlling the seal was none other than Nyetian's mother. This was because the seal in Nyetian's body was left behind by his parents. His parents were the only two people in the world who could control the seal. It was impossible for these two people to harm him. The next moment, Nyetian suddenly understood, and his eyes trembled slightly. He finally understood why the seal in his body would only awaken at this time. Because his mother was in the dark sea prison. If Chiwu Yunxiu wanted to control the seal, she would need to meet certain conditions, and the most important condition was distance. It was impossible that she and Nyetian were in a different world, and she could still control the seal. And now, the reason she could secretly control the seal in Nyetian's body was because Nyetian was close enough to her. After understanding this, Nyetian couldn't help but exclaim, my mother is not far from me. Now that he had understood everything, of course he was excited. Although he had not met his mother, she had already helped him out of danger twice. Seeing Nyetian's excitement, the fat cat waved her hand and said, don't be so excited. Your mother might be thousands of miles away from you. Thousands of miles away? Nyetian was stunned, and then he said, that's impossible. If my mother is thousands of miles away from me, how can she control the seal in my body? A strange light flashed in the fat cat's eyes, and she said, Nyetian, the seal on your godfiend nascent embryo is very strange. Unless there's a realm barrier, your parents can easily control the seal. Well, Nyetian was struck dumb for a second and was astonished. He didn't expect the power of the seal in his body to be so strong. In other words, even if he was thousands of miles away from his parents would still be able to sense his existence, unless he was in a different realm from his parents. In fact, the fat cat didn't tell Nyetian that the power of the seal in his body was far more than that. The fat cat knew that the seal in Nietion's body was very likely not created by his parents. His parents only obtained a powerful seal and then left it on Nietion's god-fiend nascent embryo. The fat cat even thought that Nietion's parents didn't know what the seal in Nietion's body was. The seal in Nietion's body shouldn't exist in this world. The fat cat was very sure that the 9 Extremes Chaos Beast had become Nietion's primordial spirit because of the seal in the god-fiend nascent embryo. However, the fat cat wouldn't tell Nietion about this because he knew that with Nietion's current knowledge, it wouldn't be good to tell him too much. Fat cat, can I use the seal in my body to find my mother? At this moment, Nietion's eyes suddenly trembled, and he asked excitedly. He didn't know where Chiwi Yunshio was imprisoned, but it would be great if he could use the power of the seal to find her. You can't. The fat cat glanced at Nietion, but shook his head and said, with your current strength, you can't control the seal in your body at all. That's why your parents can tell you of your existence, but you can't sense their existence. I'm guessing that after controlling the seal in secret twice, your mother's strength is also very depleted. If we want to find where she's imprisoned, we have to think of another way. Mother. Nietion's eyes flickered slightly, and his eyes were clearly wet. He knew that Chiwu Yunshio must have suffered a lot when she was imprisoned in the Dark Sea Black Prison. Chapter 24-25. Nietion's eyes trembled slightly. It took a long time for him to calm down. Since the seal could not find Chiwu Yunshio, he had to think of another way. Fat, can you tell how far Mother is from us? Nietion asked a moment later. He did not know anything about the Dark Sea Black Prison. It was too difficult to find a person here. The little fat cat shook its head helplessly and said, Nietion, it is not an easy task to save your mother. Let's leave this place first and find someone else to help. Nietion thought for a moment, but there was nothing he could do. He could only leave. Then he opened 9 Extreme and entered. He only relaxed after confirming that Jun Aoqing and Nye Qingwan were fine. Then he asked Jun Aoqing to come out of the 9 Superbs and briefly told her what had happened. Jun Aoqing frowned slightly. She did not think that Lian Jiofeng and the others had already left. Nietion, don't worry. We will definitely save Annie. Jun Aoqing said softly when she saw Nietion's dark expression. Her eyes flashed with determination. Nietion nodded and did not say anything. Then, the two of them moved towards the surface of the sea. A moment later, Nietion and Jun Aoqing returned to the shallow layer of the sea. Nietion spread out his senses and found that there was no one on the surface of the sea. It seemed that the people of the cities had left. He did not think too much and came out of the dark sea. The surface of the sea was silent. There was not a single person in sight. The dark sea hunt had lasted for 10 days. It had not ended yet, but everyone had left. It was clear that the Dark Monarch had ordered everyone to leave. Nietion, where are we going next? Jun Aoqing frowned slightly and asked softly, return to the 7th main city first. Nietion thought for a moment and said solemnly. After thinking about it, he decided to go back to the 7th main city first. Maybe the spirit controller could help him. He did not understand the Dark Emperor at all. However, he knew that this person's strength was definitely above his. If he acted rashly now, not only would he not be able to save his mother, he might even lose his life. After a while, Nietion arrived at the 7th main city. After entering the city, Nietion asked Jun Aoqing to return to the 9 Superbs. It would be easier for him to act alone. Then, he went straight to the city governor's mansion. At this moment, the city lord's residence was heavily guarded. Several black-clothed cultivators stood guard at the entrance. The guards at the door have changed. Nietion looked at the guards from afar and frowned slightly. He felt a little strange. He remembered that the guard from before were not these black-clothed martial artists. It looks like the Dark Monarch already knows that you left the Dark Sea. Those black-clad cultivators are likely the Dark Monarch's people. The fat cat's voice rang out in Xiao Chen's spiritual sense. Nietion nodded slightly and immediately became cautious. It was obvious that the Dark Monarch was looking for him. It was likely that the 7th main city was already under the Dark Monarch's control. Nietion leave. The fat cat frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, Hmm. Nyetion nodded and decided to leave. He was the hunter of the seventh main city. It was only natural that the Dark Monarch would want to take control of the seventh main city as soon as possible. Nyetion felt that not only was the seventh main city under the Dark Monarch's control, but the spiritualist had also been captured by the Dark Monarch. Just as Nyetion turned around, he sensed an extremely powerful aura closing in on him, causing his pupils to tighten involuntarily. However, the next moment, his expression relaxed as he murmured, "Lord Spiritualist." He could sense that the aura approaching him was none other than the spiritualist. "Nyetion, come with me." Nyetion stood on the spot. A moment later, a voice was heard. Nyetion could tell that it was the spiritualist's voice. His figure moved, following the aura. Moments later, Nyetion walked out of the seventh main city and arrived at a remote coast. "City Lord, please come out," he said with a faint smile. "Nyetion, I didn't expect you to dare to show up." The spiritualist's voice was heard as he appeared behind Nyetion. "Master, what do you know?" Nyetion turned around to look at the spiritualist and asked. The spiritualist smiled bitterly and said, "The Dark Sea hunt ended early. The Dark Monarch said that 7 kills escaped and killed all the hunters. And the person who saved 7 kills is you and your partner." "Humph." Nyetion laughed and stared at the spiritualist. He said, "Master, do you believe that?" The spiritualist stared at Nyetion as if he wanted to see something in his eyes. Unfortunately, Nyetion was very calm. His eyes were clear and nothing could be seen. "Of course, I doesn't believe it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be meeting you here alone." The spiritualist smiled and said, "But you've put I in trouble. The Dark Monarch said that I was your accomplice. Not only did he take over the seventh main city, but he also took away I's position as the city master. If I hadn't run fast enough, I'm afraid he would have been a corpse." As expected, Nyetion's eyes narrowed and his face was filled with worry. The situation was as he had expected. The seventh main city was indeed controlled by the Dark Monarch. Fortunately, the spiritualist had escaped. Nyetion had come to the seventh main city to see the spiritualist. Therefore, it didn't matter to him whether the seventh main city was controlled or not. Then, the spirit controller frowned and asked in a grim voice, "Nyetion, my young friend, what happened during the hunt in the Dark Sea?" Nyetion didn't hide anything and simply told him what happened in the Dark Sea. The spiritualist was stunned when he heard it. He didn't expect Nyetion to experience so many life and death situations in just a few days. So, the hunters were all killed by the scaled demon warriors. After a while, the spiritualist calmed down and said, 7 kills was released by the Dark Monarch himself. I didn't expect the Dark Monarch to be so cruel. He killed all the hunters for Li Juhan. I don't know how the other city lords would react if they knew about this. Nyetion smiled bitterly and said, "Not all the hunters died. At least Yang Qi and the others left." The spirit controller shook his head with a smile and said, "Yang Qi is lucky to be able to leave the Dark Sea prison. Nyetion, my friend, you didn't leave because you wanted to save your mother, right?" The spiritualist looked at Nyetion and asked, "Yes." Nyetion nodded and frowned. "I don't know where my mother is imprisoned. I would like to ask the city lord if there is an important place to imprison people in the Dark Sea prison." "Nyetion, my friend." The spiritualist looked at Nyetion with a strange light in his eyes and said, "I have a guess. Your mother is most likely imprisoned in that place by the Dark Monarch." "Where?" Nyetion's eyes lit up as he asked in surprise. "A place that interests you." The spiritualist smiled. A map appeared in his hand, and his eyes fell on a place. Chapter 24-26. Nyetion looked at the map in the spiritualist's hand, and his eyes trembled. The place that the spiritualist was looking at was the unclaimed land on the map. It was the number 1 forbidden area of the Dark Ocean, the heart of the Dark Ocean. After a while, Nyetion became cold and asked the spiritualist, "City Lord, are you saying that my mother will be imprisoned in the heart of the Dark Ocean?" The spiritualist nodded, then shook his head and said, "I am not sure. I just feel that your mother is such an important prisoner that the Dark Emperor will definitely not imprison her somewhere else. it is very likely that she will be imprisoned in the heart of the dark ocean. Nietion's eyes trembled slightly, and there was a complicated look in his eyes. Previously, he had guessed that Chi was imprisoned in the heart of the dark ocean. However, Chi's sudden appearance seemed to indicate that he was not imprisoned in the heart of the dark ocean. The spiritualist had said that the heart of the dark ocean was used to imprison the most important and dangerous enemy. If there was anyone more important than Chi, Nietion could only think of one person, and that was his mother, Yunxio. Until now, Nietion still did not know what kind of person the Dark Emperor was. However, he knew that the Dark Emperor really wanted his god-fiend embryo. Since that was the case, the Dark Emperor must also want the extreme demon embryo. Nietion was even worried that Yunxio's extreme demon embryo had already been taken away by the Dark Emperor. After all, Chi's eyes were taken away by the Dark Emperor. The heart of the dark ocean. My mother must be imprisoned in the heart of the dark ocean. The more Nietion thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. My young friend Nietion, calm down. Seeing Nietion's strange expression, the spiritualist frowned and said, even if we know that your mother is imprisoned in the heart of the dark ocean, we cannot act rashly. The Dark Emperor is the supreme existence in the entire dark ocean. Not many people in the entire dark ocean have seen his true strength. Rumor has it that about 200,000 years ago, there was a riot in the dark ocean. More than 10 city lords wanted to overthrow the Dark Emperor. They joined forces to attack the Dark Emperor Palace and were about to succeed. But in the end, they were killed by the Dark Emperor with one move. Although I do not know if this rumor is true, it is enough to prove that the Dark Emperor is powerful. At this point, the spirit controller glanced at Nietion and said, with all due respect, your strength is not worth mentioning in front of the Dark Emperor. Nietion calmed down after listening to the spirit controller. The spirit controller was right. He was too weak. Even if he encountered an ordinary city lord, he would most likely lose, let alone the Dark Emperor. The gap in their strength made Nietion calm down. Next, he wanted to save his mother, and it was definitely not going to be easy. City Lord, how much do you know about the Dark Emperor? After thinking for a moment, Nietion suddenly asked. The spiritualist could not help but be taken aback. He looked at Nietion strangely, but still said, the Dark Emperor is the ruler of the Dark Ocean, but very few people know his true appearance. It is said that the Dark Emperor has a strange habit. He rarely leaves the Dark Emperor Palace, unless something dangerous happens in the Dark Ocean, such as the 7 kills incident. Under normal circumstances, the Dark Emperor never leaves the Dark Emperor Palace. Nietion frowned. This habit of the Dark Emperor was a little strange. However, what Nietion was asking about was not this information. He wanted to know if the city lords of the Dark Ocean were absolutely loyal to the Dark Emperor. City Lord, have you ever thought of becoming the Dark Emperor? After thinking for a moment, Nietion did not beat around the bush and asked directly. Hearing Nietion's words, the spiritualist's eyes trembled. He then laughed bitterly and said, of course I have. To be honest, the city lords of the 17 main cities, and even the city lords of the vassal cities, all want to be the Dark Emperor. However, the current Dark Emperor has already ruled the Dark Ocean for hundreds of thousands of years. His strength is unfathomable, and his position as the #1 main city is as stable as a mountain. Therefore, even if the other city lords have the intention to disobey, they would not dare to show it. The corner of Nietion's mouth curled up into a smile, and he muttered, so that's how it is. Nietion, what are you thinking about? The spiritualist saw that Nietion's expression was strange, as if he was plotting something, and asked cautiously, City Lord, I want to join forces with the other city lords to fight against the Dark Emperor. Nietion said solemnly. The spiritualist furrowed his brows, and his expression was a little awkward. Nietion's suggestion was not impossible, but it was very difficult. The Dark Ocean had a total of 17 main cities and 83 vassal cities. Among the 17 city lords, none of them were willing to submit to each other. Furthermore, There was a deep hatred between them. It was almost impossible to unite the 17 city lords. City Lord, don't worry. I naturally have a way to unite the city lords. Nietian saw that the spiritualist was worried and said confidently with a smile. The spiritualist frowned, not knowing where Nietian got his confidence from. Since that's the case, I will accompany you. The spiritualist nodded heavily and prepared to accompany Nietian to meet the city lords. He was now someone that the Dark Emperor wanted to kill, so he could only choose to stand with Nietian. If the Dark Emperor did not die, there would be no place for the spiritualist in the Dark Ocean. QL 11-inch, my friend Nietian. Which city lord are you going to meet first? The spiritualist's eyes flickered as he asked. Other than the first city, is the second city the strongest? Nietian's lips twitched, and he asked thoughtfully. The spiritualist nodded and said, the city lord of the second city is called by Xianbing. This person is very shrewd, and he is a powerful character. Are you going to meet him? By Xianbing, huh? Nietian thought for a while, and he immediately thought of another person. He smiled faintly. Who is Bai Fengming to Bai Xianbing? Bai Fengming is the third of the 9 demons, Bai Xuanbing's son. The spiritualist frowned, not knowing why Nietian suddenly mentioned Bai Fengming. It seems that Bai Xianbing has long wanted to rebel. Nietian smiled faintly, and there was a strange look in his eyes. Why do you say that? The spiritualist was a little confused, and he could not help but ask. Bai Fengming has hidden his strength and wanted to kill Li Juhun during the hunt at the Dark Sea. Nietian's eyes turned, and he said faintly, since he wanted to kill Li Juhun, it proves that the second city wants to attack the first city. The spiritualist frowned, and he asked in surprise, how do you know? Nietian laughed and said, during the hunt at the Dark Sea, I fought with Bai Fengming, and he died by my hands. The spiritualist's eyes trembled. Previously, Nietian had told him about the hunt at the Dark Sea, but he had said it very simply, and there were some details that he did not mention. He did not expect that Nietian would kill Bai Fengming. Actually, Bai Fengming did die because of Nietian, but the person who killed him was not Nietian, but Jun Aoqing. Bai Fengming was killed by Jun Aoqing in a second. Chapter 24-27. Why not? Nietian looked at the spiritualist calmly and asked with a smile. Nietian, my friend, you can't joke about this. The spiritualist saw Nietian's serious face and quickly said, you killed Bai Fengming, and you still want to go to the second main city. Isn't that? He hesitated as he looked at Nietian with a confused expression, but didn't say the words courting death out loud. Nietian killed the son of the second main city lord, and he still wanted to go to the second main city. Wasn't that courting death? Bai Fengming was the third of the 9 demons, and Bai Xuanbing's most beloved son. If Bai Xianbing knew that Bai Fengming died in Nietian's hands, he would definitely kill Nietian. Rumor had it that Bai Xuanbing's strength was second only to the Dark Emperor, and he was a 100% immortal state warrior. Even the spiritualist was no match for Bai Xianbing. City Lord, look at me. Do I look like I'm joking? Nietian said with a faint smile. He looked at the spirit controller with a confident expression, as if he had a card up his sleeve. The spiritualist was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. City Lord, let's go. Nietian smiled and gestured for the spiritualist to lead the way. The spiritualist was stunned for a few seconds before he came back to his senses. He sighed and led the way. The two of them headed toward the second main city one after the other. The second main city was located in the extreme north of the Dark Ocean prison. It was on an ice field. QL-11, the Dark Ocean prison, wasn't big, but the environment was different from each other. It was hot in the south and cold in the north. Half a day later, the spiritualist and Nietian entered the second main city and came to the sky above the city lord's mansion. The city lord of the seventh main city, the spiritualist, requests to see Lord Bai Xianbing. The spiritualist stood in the air and said, City Lord Qi, the city lord would like to see you. After a while, a response came from the city lord mansion. The spiritualist nodded and said to Nietian, Little friend Nietian, let's go. Nietian nodded with a calm smile, as if nothing had happened. The spiritualist was a little nervous and said, Nietian, little friend, when you see Bai Xianbing later, try not to speak. Leave everything to I. Niet Tian chuckled, but didn't say a word, nor did he give an answer. The two of them landed on the ground. A guard led them to the main hall of the City Lord's mansion. "Welcome, City Lord Shi. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." As soon as the two of them arrived outside the main hall, a burst of hearty laughter came from the hall. Then, a middle-aged man in white clothes appeared. Niet Tian locked his eyes on the man in white and covered him with his divine consciousness. This person had a handsome appearance, a face that seemed to have been carved by a blade, a tall figure, and an imposing appearance. He was slightly similar to Bai Fengming, but his gaze was deep like the ocean, and it seemed as if it concealed a secret that was impossible to see through. This man was the city lord of the second main city, Bai Xianbing. Niet Tian looked at Bai Xianbing. His first impression was that this man was a smiling tiger. "City Governor Bai, I took the liberty to visit you. Please forgive me for the inconvenience." The spirit controller smiled apologetically and showed his respect. Niet Tian stood at the side and looked at Bai Xianbing. He did not say anything. Bai Xianbing glanced at Niet Tian. He seemed a little displeased, but did not say anything. He did not appear at the Dark Sea hunt that day, so he did not see Niet Tian. "City Lord 7, please come in." Bai Xianbing smiled faintly and gestured for the spiritualist to enter the main hall. The spiritualist and Niet Tian entered the main hall. The scene that greeted them stunned them. There were a few people sitting in the main hall. Niet Tian was familiar with some of them. He saw Yuan Ying, the city lord of the 4th main city, and Lin Biao, the city lord of the 8th main city. There were a few other people sitting beside Yuan Ying and Lin Biao. Their auras were no weaker than the two of them. It was obvious that these people were city lords of major cities. The spiritualist was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He coughed and smiled awkwardly. "Cough, cough. I didn't expect it to be so crowded here. So many city lords are here." He did not expect there to be so many city lords in Bai Xuanbing's residence. It was as if these people were plotting something. "It's you, Niet Tian." Yuan Ying and Lin Biao stood up at almost the same time. They looked at Niet Tian in shock and said in unison. However, Niet Tian's reaction was very calm. With a calm smile, he said, "Are you surprised to see me?" Yuan Ying and Lin Biao looked at Niet Tian with trembling eyes. They said at the same time, "You're not dead." All the hunters in the Dark Sea hunt had died tragically. Even Li Juhan, Bai Fengming, and the others had died. But Niet Tian had survived. In the eyes of Yuan Ying and the others, this was completely impossible. All the hunters were dead. Why was Niet Tian still alive? "City lords, do you wish for me to die?" Niet Tian smiled faintly. He did not panic at all. Lin Biao reacted and squeezed out a smile. He said that's not it. But Yuan Ying's attitude was not so good. He stared at Niet Tian coldly and asked, "Brat, why are you still alive?" His son, Yuan Lai, had died in the Dark Sea hunt. But Niet Tian was still alive. This made him feel inexplicably angry. "Why can't I be alive?" Niet Tian could not be bothered with Yuan Ying. He replied cold and stared at Bai Xianbing. He smiled faintly, but did not speak. "Are you the hunter who defeated Fengming?" Bai Xianbing looked at Niet Tian and asked in a deep voice. Niet Tian nodded slightly. He laughed and said, "City Lord Bai, it's so lively here. So many city lords are gathered here. Are you plotting something?" The spiritualist's eyes narrowed when he heard Niet Tian's words. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He did not expect Niet Tian to speak so directly. Bai Xianbing was taken aback. A murderous glint flashed in his eyes. He sneered, "Brat, sometimes it's not a good thing to be too smart." The corner of Niet Tian's mouth twitched, and he said in a more direct manner, "So you're really plotting against the Dark Sovereign then?" His voice was not loud, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder exploding in the hall. Everyone stood up in an instant and stared at Niet Tian with murderous eyes. The atmosphere fell into a suffocating silence. Niet Tian was right. Bai Xianbing and the others were gathered to plot to overthrow the Dark Emperor. The various city lords were originally quite dissatisfied with the Dark Emperor. In this Dark Sea hunt, the various cities had suffered heavy losses, and many city lords had lost their beloved sons and disciples. Bai Xianbing, Yuan Ying, Lin Yibiao and the others all lost their sons. Their anger could no longer be suppressed, and they finally exploded. Hence, the gathering of the city lords was held. But they did not expect the spiritualist and Yetian to visit. Chapter 24-28. The main hall of the city magistrate's mansion was deathly silent. The tension was palpable, like an arrow knocked on a bowstring. The spiritualist looked at the city magistrates, his forehead beaded with sweat. He wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. Nyetian had turned the situation into a deadlock with just a few words. The spiritualist hadn't expected that. Ha ha ha. Nyetian laughed. Calm down, city magistrates, he said coolly. Relax. Bai Xianbing and the others looked at Nyetian in confusion. They couldn't understand how a mid-stage paramount god could remain so calm in the face of so many powerful experts. After a few seconds, Bai Xianbing spoke in a deep voice. His delicate face was so deep that it was almost sinister. Kid, what are you trying to do? I'm here to help you, City Magistrate Bai, Nyetian said with a faint smile, not bothering to avoid Bai Xuanbing's gaze. Help us, Bai Xianbing said with a cold laugh, looking at Nyetian with disdain. You think you can help us? Nyetian was too weak, and yet he was saying he wanted to help Bai Xianbing and the others. In Bai Xuanbing's opinion, it sounded like a joke. QL11, a mid-stage paramount god, wouldn't make a difference whether he was there or not. Nyetian knew what Bai Xianbing was thinking. Bai Xianbing looked down on him. In the next moment, Nyetian's eyes flickered as he said, I killed Bai Fengming. Bai Xianbing heard the faint voice, but it was like a thunderclap. What did you just say, kid? Bai Xianbing was taken aback at first, but then his expression flickered. He let out an enraged howl, and his energy surged, shaking the entire hall. The spiritualist's eyes went wide, and he looked at Nyetian in disbelief, wondering if he'd misheard. Nyetian said that he killed Bai Fengming in front of Bai Xianbing. Wasn't that courting death? Even if you killed Bai Fengming, you don't have to say it out loud. Since no one else knew about it, Bai Xianbing thought that Bai Fengming was killed by someone else. The other city lords were also flabbergasted as they stared at Nyetian with incredulity written all over their faces. On the day of the Dark Sea Hunt, many people saw Nyetian defeat Bai Fengming. But at that time, it was not a fair fight. After all, Bai Fengming was the third strongest of the 9 demons. If it was a true battle to the death, he might not lose to Nyetian. What was even more surprising was why Nyetian would say this. I said I killed Bai Fengming. Nyetian stared at Bai Xianbing and said word by word. Impossible. Bai Xuanbing's eyes widened. You can't kill Bai Fengming with your strength. I can't. Nyetian laughed and said, the Dark Raven Sword Seal. Bai Xuanbing's expression froze when he heard this. Then, the anger in his eyes erupted like a volcano. The Dark Raven Sword Seal was Bai Fengming's hidden strength. He would not use the Dark Raven Sword Seal unless it was a life and death situation. If Nyetian knew about the Dark Raven Sword Seal, it meant that he really killed Bai Fengming. Son of AB***, you're courting death. In the next moment, Bai Xianbing let out a wild roar and unleashed all of his aura, which morphed into a torrential, ocean-like aura that rumbled towards Nyetian. He wanted to use his aura to oppress Nyetian to death. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Nyetian felt his body being enveloped by an enormous force. His chest felt like it was being pressed down by a huge rock, making it hard for him to breathe. Crack, crack, crack. The pressure from his body was too great. The floor beneath Nyetian's feet cracked inch by inch. Nyetian. Upon seeing this, the spirit controller's expression suddenly changed, and she cried out in alarm. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of Nyetian's mouth, but there was a strange smile on his face. Bai Xianbing was indeed powerful. He should be at the same level as Nangong Duxiu and Earth Chief. However, he was still weaker than Tian Chief and Yedao. City Lord Bai Fengming wanted to kill me. I was only defending myself. Nyetian endured the pressure and said, even if he didn't die in my hands, he would definitely die in the hands of a scaled demon. Bai Fengming is already dead. Even if you kill him, you won't be able to resurrect him. I can help you fight against the Dark Emperor. Take it as compensation for killing Bai Fengming. How about it? At this moment, Nie Tian's condition was not that bad. With his current strength, it was impossible for Bai Xianbing to kill him with his aura. Moreover, he could feel that the seal power in his body was about to move. If the seal activated the demonic god power again, Bai Xianbing might not be his opponent. However, he did not completely release his strength because he wanted to cooperate with Bai Xianbing. Stinking brat, you'd better break through this city lord's aura pressure before you speak. Bai Xianbing let out an explosive roar as his aura skyrocketed once again, morphing into an even stronger pressure that bore down on Nie Tian. All right, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Cold, he roared and the power of the stars in his body exploded. Boom! A muffled sound echoed out as Bai Xuanbing's aura was broken. Rumble. Almost simultaneously, the main hall of the city magistrate's mansion trembled and collapsed. Bai Xianbing staggered backward several paces under the impact of Nie Tian's aura. He steadied his body, and his eyes were filled with shock as he exclaimed, "How is this possible?" He had never imagined that Nie Tian would be able to break through his aura. Given his current level of strength, even an ordinary peak paramount god would find it hard to stand up to him. Nie Tian was only a mid-paramount god, so how could he have broken through his aura so easily? How could Nie Tian's strength be so strange? City Magistrate Bai. Nie Tian said coolly, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. You're underestimating someone who killed Bai Fengming. You should know how strong Bai Fengming is. The fact that I killed him proves that I'm stronger than him. The reason Nie Tian had brought up the matter of Bai Fengming was to prove his strength. More importantly, he wanted to shock Bai Xianbing so that he wouldn't underestimate him again. So what? Bai Xuanbing's eyes suddenly sank while he revealed killing intent, and he roared explosively. You killed my son. I'll definitely kill you. Bai Xianbing blurred into motion and punched out. Boom! His fist aura rumbled as it shot towards Nie Tian in the shape of a mountain. Like a sharp awl, it shot towards Nie Tian. Crack! 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 All of a sudden, the cold air surged out, and the surrounding space was directly frozen. In the void, countless ice blades appeared, like a storm, shrouding the profound ice fist shadows, roaring and roaring, icy cold and murderous. Watch out! The sudden turn of events caught the spirit controller off guard. He screamed, and his heart almost jumped out of his throat. The other city lords were also dumbfounded, their eyes trembling. Bai Xianbing was so strong that even a peak paramount god would be killed in the face of a single fist strike. Chapter 24-29. Die for me. Bai Xuanbing's eyes were filled with killing intent as he roared. It was as if he could already see the scene of Nie Tian being killed. In his opinion, Nie Tian would definitely not be able to block this punch. Everyone's heart tightened. They did not even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss out on this exciting scene. Boom! The mystic ice fist was like a raging dragon, exploding in the air as it headed towards Nie Tian. At this moment, Nie Tian felt the sealing force in his body being released once again. The 9,000 fiend god Qi was instantly awakened. It was obvious that his mother had helped him once again. Human sword slashes the stars. In the next moment, Nie Tian's sword intent surged out, merging with the fiend god Qi. In an instant, the fiend god sword appeared, roaring like a black dragon. So strong. The city lords were shocked by this sudden scene, and they cried out in shock. How could they have imagined that Nie Tian would be able to unleash such terrifying power in an instant? Rumble. Immediately after, the mystic ice fist and the celestial demon sword shadow collided with each other, causing a loud explosion in the air. A shockwave that was visible to the naked eye blossomed and spread in all directions like a giant ripple. Yuan Ying and the other city lords could not help but be pushed back by the shockwave. The attack that Nie Tian had unleashed was too terrifying. It actually clashed head-on with Bai Xianbing. Boom, boom. But in the next moment, the fiend god's sword shattered under the impact of the cold energy. Boundless sword intent exploded, wreaking havoc in the air. Bang! Following which, a muffled sound was heard. a figure was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Everyone could clearly see that the figure was none other than Nietian. After Nietian awakened the 9,000 fiend god Qi, he was indeed very strong. But Bai Xuanbing's punch was even stronger. Even though Nietian had temporarily awakened the 9,000 fiend god Qi, he was not Bai Xuanbing's opponent without fully unleashing the fiend god Qi. Nietian's silhouette flew a few thousand meters away before he finally managed to stabilize his body by relying on his astral soul wings. However, at this moment, his entire body was drenched in blood. QL11 Bai Xuanbing's punch was a fatal blow. It was truly terrifying. Nietian faced it head-on and suffered heavy injuries. Not dead, Bai Xuanbing raised her head abruptly while her piercingly cold and murderous gaze locked onto Nietian, and then her gaze trembled as she cried out in shock. How could this be possible? His all-out punch was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Even the other city lords present would find it difficult to withstand it. However, Nietian had actually withstood the attack head-on. Well, the others all looked at Nietian in shock. They didn't expect Nietian to survive. Bai Xuanbing's palm strike was indeed terrifying. It was unimaginable that Nietian was still alive. City Lord Bai, that's a really vicious punch. Nietian stood in the air and stared at Bai Xuanbing with a scorching gaze. There wasn't any fear in his eyes. Instead, he spoke in a mocking tone. His current state only looked frightening. However, in reality, his injuries weren't that serious. At least, his life wasn't in danger. Little bastard, you're courting death. Bai Xuanbing could hear the provocation in Nietian's words. He roared angrily and wanted to attack again. City Lord Bai, with your status, you didn't manage to kill Nietian with a single punch. Are you going to attack again? At this moment, a figure appeared and stopped Bai Xuanbing. Spiritualist, get out of my way. Bai Xuanbing stared at the person and said coldly. His tone was cold and spiritualist. City Lord Bai, Nietian is indeed very strong. With him around, he'll be a great help to us. Then, another figure appeared to protect Nietian. It was the 8th City Lord, Lin Yibiao. There was a grudge between Lin Yibiao and Nietian. Before the hunt at the Dark Sea, Nietian injured his son, Lin Qiang. Because of that, Lin Qiang didn't participate in the hunt at the Dark Sea and managed to stay alive. Therefore, Lin Yibiao didn't hate Nietian. Instead, he was grateful. City Lord Bai, let's forget about your son. The other city lords tried to persuade him after witnessing how terrifying Nietian was. All of you, get out of my way. Bai Xuanbing's face was stern. He looked at everyone and said coldly, I must kill him today. I'll kill anyone who dares to stop me. Bai Xuanbing's cold roar showed his determination to kill Nietian. Since he had already made his move, there was no way he would allow Nietian to live. The spiritualist and the others felt Bai Xuanbing's murderous intent. They were stunned and instinctively took a step back. Die, son of AB *TSH. At that moment, Bai Xuanbing suddenly moved. He soared into the sky and released an extremely cold, mystical ice chi. Crack, crack, crack. Terrifying dark ice spread out, and wherever Bai Xuanbing passed, the space was directly frozen. Outside his body, the mystical ice chi formed a giant icicle that was close to 10,000 meters long. He turned into a moving iceberg and charged towards Nietian. Bai Xuanbing released his mystical ice chi to the extreme. He was determined to kill Nietian this time. High up in the sky, Nietian sensed the piercing aura and couldn't help but frown. Bai Xuanbing's aura was even more terrifying than before. It was impossible for Nietian to block the attack with the strength of 9,000 demons. Nietian, gather the strength of 9,000 demons and attack your right eye. Suddenly, Fat Cat's voice rang in Nietian's divine sense. Nietian was stunned and couldn't react in time. Don't ask too much. Do it now. Fat Cat screamed anxiously. Nietian's eyes narrowed. He made up his mind and immediately activated the celestial demon embryo. The strength of 9,000 demons gathered like a raging dragon and rushed towards his right eye. He didn't know why Fat Cat wanted him to do this, nor did he know what the consequences would be. The power of 9,000 gods and demons was attacking his right eye. Was he trying to destroy his right eye? But at this moment, Niet Tion couldn't care less. He had to risk his life. He chose to believe in Fat Cat. Ruimble. The power of 9,000 gods and devils within Niet Tion's body surged violently and rushed towards his right eye like waves of gods and devils. In the next moment, Niet Tion's right eye trembled and exploded. Half of his face became a bloody mess. Arg! The sudden pain spread throughout his body, and Niet Tion couldn't help but scream. The others were stunned. They looked at Niet Tion in a daze, not knowing what had happened. Boom! In the next moment, Niet Tion felt a rumbling sound in his eye sockets, and the power of 9,000 fiend gods formed a vortex of fiend gods. In the next moment, a bizarre scene occurred. The vortex spun madly, and in the blink of an eye, turned into Niet Tion's eyeball. As soon as the eyeball came to form, Niet Tion felt a surge of boundless power, which was about to be unleashed in the next moment. Chapter 2430. Demonic Eye. Boom! The moment the little fat cat uttered those 3 words, a cold black light suddenly burst out of Niet Tion's right eye, like a sharp arrow shot out of a bow, murderous and murderous. In an instant, an extremely dark aura spread out and filled the space within a few thousand meters. The entire space seemed to have fallen into eternal darkness. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, the cold black light pierced through the giant icicle, and there was an explosion in the air. The huge ice all exploded inch by inch, crumbling bit by bit, turning into ice-cold air in the air, dispersing. The space within a 10,000-meter radius was affected by the mystical ice chi and was covered in a layer of frost. At this moment, Bai Xuanbing's eyes trembled, and her face was filled with extreme shock. He saw a ray of black light coming towards him. It was so fast that it almost tore the space apart. Ugh! Before he could react, he heard the sound of flesh being torn apart. Then, a heart-wrenching pain spread through his entire body. That black beam actually pierced through his chest and pierced through the vital point of his heart. Bai Xuanbing's body trembled and he lost control. He fell from the sky like a kite with a broken string. The sudden scene made everyone's eyes widen. They had no idea what had happened. QL-11, by the time they reacted, Bai Xianbing had already landed heavily on the ground, creating a deep pit. His entire body had turned into a pile of meat paste. Everyone looked at the ground in unison, and they were shocked to the extreme. Their eyes and bodies were trembling, and they didn't know how to express the shock in their hearts. The city lord of the second main city, Bai Xianbing, was second only to the Dark Emperor in the Dark Ocean prison. But he was killed by Niet Tion in such a strange way. This scene was simply too shocking. The city lord stood rooted to the ground like statues. They never would have thought that Bai Xianbing would be killed by Niet Tion after killing him. At the same time, high up in the sky, Niet Tion's figure froze, and the god-fiend power around him dissipated. His aura returned to normal. At this moment, he was no different from before. However, there was a slight change in his right eye. There was an extreme dark power hidden in his pupil. Niet Tion stood rooted to the ground in a daze. After a long while, he came to his senses and asked in a trembling voice, what happened just now? He did kill Bai Xianbing, but he didn't know how he did it. In fact, he couldn't even feel any changes in himself at this moment. He clearly remembered that his right eye had exploded under the impact of the power of 9,000 fiend gods. But now his right eye was as good as new. There was only a faint power hidden in it, like a monster in deep sleep. Niet Tion, you just activated the demonic eye. After a long time, the fat cat's voice sounded, trembling a little. It was obvious that she was very nervous and excited. Demonic eye? Niet Tion was stunned. He had no idea what the fat cat was talking about. He only knew that his eye was the starry eye. When did it become the demonic eye? Niet Tion, I don't know what's going on either, Niet Tion said. The fat cat took a deep breath and calmed down. I only vaguely remember that people with the god fiend, nascent embryo, have very powerful eye powers. Just now I suddenly thought of the demonic eye. So I asked you to use the power of 9,000 fiend gods to activate the demonic eye. Nyation frowned as he recalled what happened just now. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His heart palpitated. The fat cat wasn't sure about the demonic eye, so she asked him to forcefully attack his right eye. If the demonic eye hadn't been activated just now, Nyation would have been a corpse. But until now, he still didn't know what the demonic eye was. Was it an innate other pupil? Obviously, the fat cat didn't know much about the demonic eye. After all, he only had 7 tails, and many chinchillas' inherited memories hadn't been awakened yet. Fat, how can the demonic eye be so powerful? Nyation was stunned for a moment. He looked at Bai Xuanbing's corpse on the ground and asked in astonishment. The demonic eye had just been activated, and a ray of eye power killed a peak immortal state expert. Wasn't this a little too terrifying? The fat cat frowned. When the demonic eye was activated, it was attacked by the power of 9,000 fiend gods. That's why it released such a powerful demonic energy. Under normal circumstances, the power of the demonic eye is closely related to the power of the fiend gods that you awaken. The more power you awaken, the more powerful the demonic eye will be. Nyation nodded. So the demonic eye's eye power was stimulated by the power of the fiend gods. However, the power of the fiend gods in his body wasn't fully awakened. It was only under the stimulation of the seal in his body that he temporarily awakened the power of 9,000 fiend gods. Fat, why did the demonic eye only awaken the right eye? What about the left eye? Nyation asked as he thought of another question. The fat cat hesitated when he heard Nyation's question. He coughed and said, I don't know either. Nyation frowned and couldn't help but smile as he joked. Don't tell me your left eye is a different pupil. The awakening of the abnormal pupil usually happened in both eyes. It wasn't normal for Nyation to only awaken the right eye. The fat cat was stunned. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. He didn't expect Nyation's joke to be right. The eyes of the fiend god nascent embryo were indeed 2 different abnormal pupils. Nyation's right eye was the demonic eye, while his left eye was the other abnormal pupil. The fat cat vaguely remembered that in the later stages, the fiend god nascent embryo's left and right eyes could fuse together and become even more powerful abnormal pupils. The demonic eye doesn't seem to be among the 10 pre-heaven abnormal pupils. Nyation murmured, wondering which one was more powerful, the demonic eye or the 10 pre-heaven abnormal pupils. But for now, the demonic eye wasn't any weaker than the other abnormal pupils. After all, the devil eye had killed a peak paramount god in the blink of an eye. Nyation, don't worry about the demonic eye for now, the fat cat said with a smile. Let's deal with the current situation. Nyation smiled and nodded. He descended from the sky and landed in front of the spiritualist and the others. At this moment, the spirit controller and the other city lords were looking at Nyation with disbelief in their eyes. Their eyes were filled with shock and confusion, but more than anything else, they were filled with fear and dread. The fact that Nyation had killed Bai Xuanbing in the blink of an eye had shocked the city lords to an unimaginable degree. Bai Xuanbing had been the strongest among them, and yet she had been killed by Nyation. How could they not be afraid of Nyation? City lords, have you seen enough? Nyation's expression was indifferent, and he said coldly, with a carefree expression. The city lords suddenly snapped out of their daze, and expressions of fear appeared on their faces. They feared that Nyation would get angry and kill them all. The truth was that Nyation wasn't strong enough to fight any of them. His demonic eye had been drained of its power and was currently in a state of replenishment. He had no idea how long it would take for the demonic eye to recover. Chapter 2431. Nyation looked at the group of city lords with a strange gaze, a strange smile on his face. The city lords all looked fearful and didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Fellow city lords, I'm not here to kill anyone. Then, Nyation looked at everyone and smiled. I just want to join forces with everyone to fight against the Dark Emperor. I don't think you are like City Lord Bai Xuanbing and think that I don't have the right to join forces with you, right? His calm words were like thunder in the ears of the city lords. causing their bodies to tremble slightly. Bai Xianbing looked down on Nye Tian, but in the end, he was killed by Nye Tian. At this moment, how could these city lords possibly despise Nye Tian? They felt that Nye Tian was far stronger than them and could even fight against the Dark Emperor. "Nya, Lord Nye Tian, you must be joking." After a while, Yuan Ying was the first to speak. He smiled apologetically and said respectfully, "It is my honor to be able to join forces with Lord Nye Tian. Fourth City Lord is indeed a smart man." Nye Tian smiled faintly. His gaze swept from Yuan Ying to the other city lords, and he said, "Everyone, the four city lords have already expressed their stance. What about you?" "I, Lin Biao, am willing to follow Lord Nye Tian to fight against the Dark Emperor." Lin Biao immediately reacted and said loudly, "I am willing to follow Lord Nye Tian." The other city lords reacted and said quickly. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nye Tian's mouth. He was very satisfied with everyone's attitude. He originally only wanted to join forces with these city lords, but he didn't expect to become their leader. This was the power of an expert. If Nye Tian hadn't killed Bai Xianbing, these city lords wouldn't have respected him. Since he got the approval of the city lords, the rest would be easier. Afterwards, Nye Tian and the others arrived at a small courtyard, where they took their seats. "Lord Spiritualist, give me the map." Nye Tian looked at the spiritualist and nodded. "Lord Nye Tian." The spiritualist handed the map to Nye Tian with a respectful expression. Even the way he addressed Nye Tian had changed. Nye Tian took the map and opened it. His gaze locked onto the heart of the Dark Sea. "Lord Nye Tian, could it be that you wish to enter the heart of the Dark Sea?" Lin Biao asked in astonishment as he looked at Nye Tian. "Yes." Nye Tian nodded his head and did not explain too much. Instead, he said, "I heard that the Dark Emperor rarely leaves the Dark Emperor Hall. Then we will start from the heart of the Dark Sea." This. Yuan Ying's expression darkened. He hesitated and said, "Lord Nye Tian, the heart of the Dark Sea is in the center of the Dark Sea and is surrounded by 17 main cities. It is hundreds of miles away from the first main city where the Dark Emperor is. Why do we want to start from the heart of the Dark Sea?" Before Nye Tian could speak, the spiritualist glared at Yuan Ying and said, "Lord," before Nye Tian could speak. "Yuan Ying, since Lord Nye Tian has made this decision, then he must have his reasons. Why do you ask so many questions?" Yuan Ying's gaze froze, and he didn't dare to speak anymore. However, his expression darkened even more. Nye Tian's gaze swept across everyone. He thought for a while and said, "To be honest, we are going to the heart of the Dark Sea to save someone." "Save people?" Yuan Ying and the others were taken aback, their faces filled with astonishment. They had thought that Nye Tian wanted to enter the heart of the Dark Sea to occupy this place first, then think of a way to attack the first main city. They didn't expect that Nye Tian was actually going to save someone. "Lord Nye Tian, who exactly is imprisoned in the heart of the Dark Sea?" Lin Biao calmed down and asked nervously. The heart of the Dark Sea was the first forbidden area of the Dark Sea prison. Someone was actually imprisoned there. It must be a very terrifying person. A person who is very important to me. Nye Tian's eyes were burning as he said in a deep voice. Obviously, he didn't want to say too much to these people. Lin Biao and the others were very smart and didn't ask anymore. "Do any of you know about the heart of the Dark Sea?" Nye Tian's gaze swept across everyone and asked with a frown. "Lord Nye Tian, I am the fifth main city's city Lord Qilan." At this time, the fifth city Lord Qilan spoke and said, "The fifth main city is the closest to the heart of the Dark Sea. I have secretly explored the heart of the Dark Sea before." "Huh." The other city lords heard Qilan's words, and their expressions changed at the same time. The heart of the Dark Sea was a forbidden area, and no one was allowed to approach it. Qilan actually secretly explored it. Qilan laughed dryly and ignored the others. He looked at Nye Tian and said, "Lord Nye Tian, I brought 30 martial artists to explore the heart of the Dark Sea. But when I came back, I was the only one left." As he spoke, Qilan's expression was a little frightened. It was obvious that he recalled something terrifying. "Fifth City Lord, what did you experience?" Nye Tian frowned and asked in a deep voice. very terrifying. Chilan's expression was solemn, and his eyes couldn't hide the fear. He said, "Actually, we didn't enter the heart of the dark sea at that time. We just came to the outer sea of the heart of the dark sea. It was there that we encountered a terrifying killing array. All my subordinates died in the killing array. I risked my life to escape from the killing array. There's still a terrible wound on my chest." As Chilan spoke, he tore off his shirt and revealed his majestic upper body. On his chest, there was a clear black handprint. It looked like a ghost claw and was full of hostility. Nietian sensed the aura of the black handprint, and his eyes couldn't help but change. This aura was very similar to the aura of Li Qi. The dark aura was strong, and at the same time, there was also a majestic wood attribute aura. It seems that the killing array is not trivial, the spiritualist said and looked at Chilan. It can actually hurt the fifth city lord. The fifth city lord, Chilan, was the youngest among all the main city lords. He was only a few 100,000 years old. However, Chilan's strength was very strong. He was said to be second only to the Dark Emperor and Bai Xianbing. The killing array could injure Chilan like this. It showed how terrifying it was. Fifth City Lord, this black handprint has a strong suppression on your strength, right? Nietian looked at Chilan and said in a deep voice. Chilan smiled bitterly and nodded helplessly. This black handprint was very strange. Chilan tried all kinds of methods, but couldn't get rid of it. Although the handprint didn't make him feel pain, it had a strong suppression on his strength. "Don't move. Let me try." Nietian's face darkened slightly. Then, a black flame gushed out of his palm and directly shrouded the black handprint on Chilan's body. Chilan instantly felt a sharp pain. It was as if his body was about to be torn apart. It made his face contorted in pain. However, the next moment, he felt that the suppression of the black handprint was a lot weaker. After a while, the black flame disappeared. The handprint on Chilan's chest didn't disappear, but it was a lot lighter. "Thank you, Lord Nietian." Chilan was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted and bowed to thank him. "It's nothing." Nietian smiled faintly, but he was very surprised. He had used the heart of nothingness just now, but he couldn't devour the handprint on Chilan's body. It showed how strong the power contained in the handprint was. The others were stunned for a long time before they reacted. Nietian's method was really terrifying. Then, Nietian didn't waste any time and directly said in a commanding tone, "Dear city lords, let's go to the heart of the Dark Sea in 3 days." Chapter 2432. 3 days later, in the sky above the second city lord, 8 figures stood in a row. It was Nietian and the others. After 3 days of rest, Nietian's condition had recovered to its peak. However, his demon eye's pupil power still had not recovered. He originally thought that the demon eye would recover within 3 days, but now he realized that only a small part of the pupil power of the demon eye had recovered. According to this rate of recovery, it would take at least a month for the pupil power to completely recover. In other words, every time Nietian used the demon eye, he would need a month to recover. And the use of the demon eye also needed to be stimulated by the power of the gods and demons. Therefore, although the demon eye was very scary, it was also very limited. Nietian did not wait for too long. He was afraid that the Dark Emperor would know of his plan and be on guard. "Lord Nietian, let's go." Chilan stood beside Nietian and said lightly. Nietian nodded slightly, and everyone moved together towards the heart of the Dark Sea. About half an hour later, everyone came to the sky above a dark sea. Below them was a large dark island. "Is this the heart of the Dark Sea?" Nietian looked at the dark island below and frowned slightly. He sensed that the entire island was shrouded by a powerful force. This power was very strange. It somewhat resembled a spirit formation, yet it also resembled a restriction. "Lord Nietian, this island is the heart of the Dark Sea. We are now only at the outermost part of the heart of the Dark Sea. We are not close to the periphery of the heart of the Dark Sea." Chilan said solemnly, obviously recalling her past. Her eyes could not help but show some panic. Nietian nodded and said to Fat Cat, "Fat, can you see anything?" The heart of the ocean was obviously protected by a huge killing array. Hopefully, Fat Cat could see through the killing array and find a safe path for Nyetian and the others. The Fat Cat was quiet for a while. After a long time, she sighed and said, Nyetian, the killing formation in front of us is very strange. The formation theory is strange, and the formation is unpredictable. If I want to break this killing formation, I'll need at least a few months. When Nyetian heard the Fat Cat's words, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and his expression turned ugly. This killing formation was indeed unique. Even the Fat Cat needed several months to decipher it. Unfortunately, Nyetian did not have that much time. With so many of them coming to the heart of the Dark Sea, they would soon alarm the Dark Emperor. Moreover, Nyetian was in a hurry, so he couldn't wait for several months. Looks like we can only force our way through the killing formation. Immediately, Nyetian's eyes focused and said solemnly, Lord Nyetian, are we really going to force our way through? Qilin gulped and looked at Nyetian in shock. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nyetian's mouth as he nodded vigorously. Since they had already come to the heart of the ocean, there was no reason to turn around and leave. The other city lords looked at Nyetian, then looked at the heart of the ocean below, and they also looked frightened. Qilin, with her strength, was injured by the killing formation. It could be seen how terrifying the killing formation was. Nyetian, wait a moment. Give me some time. At this time, the Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded. Nyetian was stunned for a moment, but didn't ask too much. Then, the Fat Cat's figure appeared. Ignoring the surprised reaction of the spiritualist and the others, it continuously released the colored glass chi. After a while, a small formation formed by the colored glass chi appeared, and one could clearly see the 8 formation eyes. At this time, beads of sweat appeared on the Fat Cat's forehead. Its figure moved, and it returned to the origin fetus space. It said to Nyetian, Nyetian, this is a miniature octagonal formation. You guys stay in the formation and suppress the formation eyes. With the octagonal formation as support, it will be easier to break the killing formation. Okay. Nyetian nodded and smiled, and was the first to step into the octagonal formation. The other 7 city lords looked at each other and also entered the formation. The 8 formation eyes were all occupied, and the octagonal formation slowly operated. Nyetian felt that his body was surrounded by the power of the formation, which made his aura a lot stronger. The others also noticed this, and their faces were not small. Who would have thought that the Fat Cat that Nyetian raised would have such a powerful method? Everyone, let's break through the formation together. Nyetian smiled faintly, and his figure moved, and he swooped down. The 7 city lords all followed, maintaining the same formation, but there was an unconcealable fear on their faces. They also did not know what would happen next. Boom! Just as Nyetian and the others were within 10,000 meters of the heart of the Dark Sea, they directly broke through the killing formation barrier in the space. With a boom, the killing formation was instantly activated. In the next moment, an extremely strange scene appeared. Boom, boom, boom. On the surface of the sea, countless giant black trees suddenly sprang up like a wild dragon breaking out of the abyss and spread out in the void. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One after another, the giant black trees grew in the air, and in an instant, they spread out in the entire space. The surface of the sea was directly filled up by the giant black trees. Nyetian and the others felt as if they had come to a dark forest. Everyone looked at the forest of black trees below, unable to conceal the fear in their eyes. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and there was a hint of panic in her voice. Before Nyetian had time to ask more, he saw that the black trees below were actually connected one by one and instantly formed a giant wood monster. The appearance of the wood monsters was somewhat similar to the tree people, but their sizes were different. The small ones were only a few meters large, and the big ones were hundreds or even thousands of meters large. This is the wood monster. Nyetian was stunned for a moment, and then he shouted in surprise. Roar! Just as his voice fell, suddenly there was a shrill and ear-piercing roar from below, and all the wood monsters instantly went crazy, leaping into the air and rushing towards Nyetion and the others. The wood monsters stretched out their giant blackwood arms and waved them in the air, like wild snakes, dark and violet. Kill! Seeing a wood monster rushing up, Nyetion directly roared and directly stabbed out with his sword. The sword shadow flew out like a shocking rainbow, and the brilliance of the sword bloomed for 10,000 meters. Boom! The moment the sword shadow fell, there was a sound of an explosion, and the body of the wood monster was bombarded into pieces. Seeing this, Nyetion slightly raised the corner of his mouth and murmured, "These wood monsters are not that strong." He killed a wood monster that was nearly 1,000 meters in size with one sword strike. Then wouldn't the smaller wood monsters be even more vulnerable? Boom, 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 boom. At the same time, the 7 city lords also made their moves, and pieces of shattered blackwood appeared in midair. City Lord Wu, is this the killing array you encountered? It's not that strong. Yuan couldn't help but say proudly after they defeated the first wave of attack and instantly killed many large wood monsters. Don't be careless. Qilin was very nervous and said loudly, "These wood monsters are not what you think. The larger the wood monsters are, the weaker they are, and the smaller wood monsters are the most terrifying." Hearing Qilin's words, everyone couldn't help but sink their eyes, and their faces became embarrassed. The wood monsters they had just killed were all large wood monsters, but the smaller wood monsters were stronger. Chapter 2433. Countless wood spirits rushed over, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Their tremendous power vibrated, and even the surrounding space was pulled taut. Nyetion's eyes narrowed and his heart sank. This time, the wood demons were a lot smaller, but their auras were even more powerful. They looked ferocious and berserk, as if they wanted to eat people. "Everyone be careful. These wood demons are very powerful." Qilin roared. His eyes were trembling slightly. He had fought against these wood demons before, so he knew how terrifying they were. Swoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as he finished his sentence, the group of wood monsters rushed over. Beams of blackwood whipped down like steel whips, bombarding the octagonal formation. Seeing this, Nyetion and the others released their auras at the same time. The octagonal array's power increased by several times, and a bright barrier appeared outside the array. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, endless blackwood fell on the octagonal formation, but it was blocked by the protective shield and shattered into pieces. Then, the wood demon army rushed over. Their pitch-black faces made them look like ghosts, and they kept screaming. At the same time, they waved their arms, trying to tear the octagonal formation apart. The octagonal formation was completely surrounded by the wood demons. In front of Nyetion and the others, there was only darkness. Attack! At this moment, Nyetion let out a low roar and slashed out with the starlight heaven slash. The sword image was like a dragon as it charged out and bombarded the group of wood demons. Boom! With a loud explosion, the sword shadow shattered countless wood demons and opened up a path. Charge forward! Nyetion roared. His figure moved, and he rushed forward. The 7 city lords followed closely behind Nyetion, maintaining the octagonal formation. With the protection of the octagonal formation, Nyetion and the others' battle prowess had increased significantly. Even when facing the 100-meter-long wood demons, they could still deal with them with ease. However, there were too many wood demons in the entire killing formation. They were packed together like a sea of blackwood. Nyetion and the others relied on the octagonal formation to charge left and right, but they could not find a way to break through the killing formation. Roar! Immediately after, another wave of wood demons rushed up, and their ear-piercing roars resounded through the killing array. Guard the eye of the array, Nyetion growled in a low voice. At the same time, he stabbed out with his sword, and the sword's shadow blasted out a path. The octagonal formation was like a moving hill. It instantly rushed out and crushed countless wood demons. Unfortunately, there were too many wood demons, and the smallest and scariest wood demon was madly rushing over. Nyetian rushed down. The passageway to the heart of the dark sea is at the bottom. At this time, the fat cat's voice rang out anxiously. Nyetian was taken aback. His demonic eye flickered. Through the endless wood spirits, he could see a clear channel in the sea below. "City lords, follow me closely," shouted Nyetian. Sword intent exploded from his body as he slashed down with the starlight heaven slash. Rumble! Suddenly, the sword shadow was like a raging dragon, rushing through countless wood demons. Endless black wood shattered in the air, turning into sawdust and scattering. Nyetian's figure moved, and he dove down. The others were shocked by Nyetian's actions, and cold sweat broke out on their backs. Nyetian was actually rushing down. The wood demons below were even more concentrated, and the smallest and most violent wood demons were all concentrated below. No one could figure out what Nyetian was trying to do, but they reacted very quickly, and without any hesitation, they followed closely behind Nyetian. QL11 at this time, they could only choose to believe in Nyetian. Rumble! Nyetian dove down, sword shadow opening a path. The power of gods and demons was released wildly, and endless sword intent was released. Wherever his figure passed, countless black wood flew, and there were ghostly wails and wolf howls. But as his figure descended, Nyetian felt that the resistance was getting stronger and stronger, and he gradually slowed down. Roar, roar, roar. At this time, an incomparably mournful roar sounded, and the wood demons below suddenly scattered, as if they were hit by something. Nyetian's eyes suddenly froze, and he felt several terrifying auras appear. Bang, bang, bang. The next moment, after several muffled sounds, 3 wood demons that were only a few meters tall appeared. They moved very quickly, and they attacked Nyetian and the others. These wood demons looked 70 to 80% similar to humans, but their bodies were as black as charcoal, and they looked very frightening. Wood demon kings. Qilon saw the small wood demons, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he shouted in surprise. He was all too familiar with these small wood demons, because the black handprint on his chest was caused by these small wood demons. Although these small wood demons were very small, their strength was very strong, and they were worthy of being called wood demon kings. Why is this little thing's aura so strong? The spiritualist and the others looked at the wood demon kings, and they couldn't help but gasp. The aura that the wood demon kings emitted was even more terrifying than these city lords. Roar! At this time, a wood demon king had already rushed over, and with a mournful roar, its black arm fiercely fell, directly bombarding the octagonal formation. Kaboom! The octagonal formation was bombarded, and there was a crisp sound. On the outer shield of the formation, a dazzling crack appeared. *T. Seeing this, Nyetian couldn't help but scream in his heart. The wood demon king's strength was too strong, and with a casual attack, it actually broke the octagonal formation shield. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, the other 2 wood demon kings rushed over, and at the same time, the octagonal formation shield immediately shattered. Suddenly, the octagonal formation shook, as if it was going to be broken in the next moment. Seeing this, the 7 city lords all gasped, and their faces were extremely shocked. Everyone, don't panic. We must protect the formation eye. At this critical moment, Nyetian roared. At the same time, the 9 yuan meridians in his body started to operate crazily, and a majestic and vast dragon energy was released, surging in the space. Roar, roar, roar. At the same time, the 3 wood demon kings let out a strange roar. At the same time, their eyes locked on Nyetian, and in their pitch-black eyes, there was an eerie coldness. In an instant, the 3 wood demon kings moved together, and like 3 black rays, they bombarded Nyetian. Get out of my way! Nyetian roared, and the dragon energy in his body instantly condensed and suddenly exploded, and a giant red dragon appeared. Roar! Immediately after, The dragon's roar shook the sky, and the surrounding large wood demons directly collapsed, and the slightly smaller wood demons were shaken and continuously retreated. The 3 wood demon kings, however, were fearless, and like 3 black sharp blades, they actually penetrated the giant dragon's body and attacked Nyetion. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 wood demon kings pierced through the dragon's body, and an ear-piercing sound came from air. Seeing the 3 black shadows in front of him getting closer and closer, Nyetion couldn't help but tremble. He didn't expect the wood demon kings to be so strong, and they could easily penetrate the dragon's shadow. The 3 wood demon kings passed through the dragon's chi and madly attacked, releasing a fierce aura from their bodies. At the same time, they waved their black arms and smashed fiercely towards Nyetion. At this moment, Nyetion felt the real breath of death. In this situation, he couldn't fight back at all. However, the 3 wood demon kings were equivalent to 3 experts who were close to the peak of the immortal state. Even if Nyetion's martial body was strong, he couldn't withstand such a terrifying attack. Nyetion, at the moment of life and death, a voice suddenly sounded in Nyetion's divine sense. This was a completely unfamiliar voice, but it made Nyetion feel inexplicably familiar and intimate. Chapter 2434. The unfamiliar voice made Nyetion feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He almost subconsciously shouted the 2 words, and then his whole body stiffened. Nyetion. At that moment, another voice rang out, startling Nyetion. Nyetion. At this time, the 3 wood demon kings had already arrived beside him and were less than a few meters away. Swoosh, swoosh. 3 terrifying forces came head-on, and the cold aura was suffocating. Nyetion almost subconsciously raised his arm, and his whole body's aura was as majestic as a mountain, majestic and powerful. He threw out a punch, without any fancy moves, but it caused the surrounding space to tremble, and a violent fist force whizzed out. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, 3 muffled sounds were heard, and the 3 figures of the wood demon kings were all sent flying, and their bodies directly collapsed in the air, turning into a pile of sawdust. Everyone was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, and stared at Nyetion in astonishment. 3 wood demon kings, 3 powerhouses that were close to the peak of the immortal state, were killed by Nyetion with 1 punch. If they did not see it with their own eyes, no one would believe the scene in front of them. The 7 city lords were all powerhouses, and they could naturally feel the power of the wood demon kings. But Nyetion just casually punched and killed 3 wood demon kings. This was too strange. How did Nyetion do it? The 7 city lords were puzzled, but Nyetion himself was even more puzzled. In that instant, he felt the power of 9,000 fiend gods awaken again, and it was more violent than before. The feeling of power that was about to burst out made him feel like his whole body was about to explode. But this feeling only lasted for a moment. At this moment, Nyetion had already returned to normal. What is going on? And that inexplicable voice, where did it come from? Nyetion was very sure that the voice just now must have come from his mother, Chiwi Yunshio. But now, the voice had disappeared, and everything had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Just as Nyetion was feeling puzzled, the fat cat's voice rang out again, shouting anxiously, Nyetion, don't just stand there. Let's enter the passage below first. City lords, follow me. Nyetion reacted. He didn't have time to think too much. His figure moved, and he rushed down. Without the obstruction of the Wood Demon King, his speed was very fast. In the blink of an eye, everyone arrived at the bottom and landed in a passage above the sea. This passageway is the entrance to the heart of the dark sea. Nyetion cried out in pleasant surprise. His figure moved, and he dashed forward madly. The 7 city lords followed closely, not daring to be careless. Nyetion and the others followed the passageway, and after a while, they entered an underground tunnel. Feeling that the surroundings were safe, Nyetion and the others slowed down. The 7 city lords followed closely behind Nyetion, unable to hide the shock on their faces. The scene just now was too strange. Now that they thought about it, they were still in shock. Nyetian killed 3 wood demon kings with 1 punch. How'd he do it? Nyetian had the same doubts in his heart. Fat, what happened just now? Nyetian couldn't help but ask Fat Cat with a frown. What happened just now? Nyetian, did you hear that voice just now? Fat Cat hesitated and asked. Yes. Nyetian nodded heavily and said hesitantly. It was an unfamiliar voice, but I felt inexplicably familiar. Speaking up to hear, he paused, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He said, I think that was my mother's voice. Perhaps saying this would make Fat Cat feel very strange. But this was Nyetian's true thoughts. Fat Cat let out a long breath and said, Nyetian, that was indeed your mother's voice. It's true. Nyetian's eyes trembled, and he almost cried out in surprise. Although he was very sure of this, when Fat Cat confirmed it, he still couldn't hide his excitement. The voice that sounded in his divine sense just now was really his mother. Nyetian's eyes flashed violently, and his heart was very shocked. He didn't understand why Chi Wu Yunxio's voice suddenly sounded. Nyetian, I think we found the right person this time. Fat Cat's face was gloomy and said, Your mother is indeed imprisoned in the heart of the dark sea, and we're very close to her. Nyetian's eyes suddenly shrank, and then he calmed down and asked with fiery eyes, Fat, are you sure? I'm sure. Fat Cat nodded heavily and said, The reason why your mother can talk to you must be because of the power of the seal in your body. This means that your mother is very close to us. When Nyetian heard Fat Cat's words, his face suddenly stiffened, and his whole body froze on the spot. He was already so close to his mother. Lord Nyetian, are you okay? The spiritualist saw Nyetian frozen on the spot and stepped forward to ask. Nyetian reacted and slightly waved his hand, indicating that he was fine, but his eyes were extremely fiery. He suppressed the excitement in his heart and sped up. After a while, Nyetian and the others walked out of the tunnel, and in front of them was a thorny forest. Boom! At this time, Nyetian suddenly felt a roar in his body, as if there was a huge power slowly awakening. Nyetian, don't come over. Almost at the same time, a voice was heard, very clear, and resounded in Nyetian's divine sense. Although the voice was urgent, it was very pleasant to listen to, and it had the magnetism of a mother, making one feel an indescribable warmth. Mother! Nyetian suddenly realized what was going on, and his expression changed drastically as he cried out in alarm. This voice was the voice that he had heard before. He was even closer to Chi Wu Yunxio. It's right in front. Fat Cat's voice was heard, and with a strange cry, its figure appeared and pointed at the thorny forest in front of them. Nyetian nodded, and in a flash, he sprinted towards the thorny forest. He moved like lightning, and in the blink of an eye, he passed through the forest, and what appeared in front of him was a huge abyss. The abyss was tens of thousands of meters wide, and at a glance, it was bottomless and gave off a chilling aura. At this moment, Nyetian felt that the blood in his body was inexplicably agitated, and the sea of demons and celestial demons in the origin fetus space instantly became violent, as if it was boiling. It's here! Nyetian looked at the bottomless abyss and shouted excitedly. Without a doubt, Chi Wu Yunxio was imprisoned in this bottomless abyss. At this moment, Chi Wu Yunxio's voice was heard once again, and it sounded very anxious. Nyetian, leave this place now. Mother! Nyetian looked at the abyss in front of him, and his eyes were trembling. He was already here, and he was going to see his mother soon. How could he leave? Lord Nyetian. At this moment, the 7 city leaders appeared, and they came to Nyetian's side. What is this place? They looked at the abyss in front of them, and they could not help but gasp, and their faces were full of fear. The abyss was too intimidating, and it seemed to hide endless darkness, making people feel hopeless. Chapter 2435. Nyetian. Nyetian's sudden action caused everyone to exclaim in unison. Who would have thought that Nyetian would jump directly into the abyss? He did not know what was in the abyss at all. Wouldn't it be dangerous for him to jump straight in? Nyetian, indeed, did not know how dangerous the abyss was, but he knew that his mother was imprisoned in the abyss. As a son, facing his imprisoned mother, even if the sky fell and the earth split apart, he would not be afraid. Nyetian's figure instantly disappeared, submerged in the abyss. The 7 city lords looked at each other, hesitating whether to enter the abyss or not. Everyone, if you don't go down, then wait here. The spiritualist's eyes flickered, and he was the first to speak. Then, he took a step out and fell into the abyss. The other city lords were stunned. They did not expect the spiritualist to be so decisive, actually following him into the abyss. They were stunned for a moment, looked at each other, and finally decided to enter the abyss. Since they had already come to the heart of the dark sea, if they did not go in and take a look, it would inevitably be a pity in their hearts. More importantly, Nyetian and the spiritualist had already gone down. If they did not go, there would definitely be a rift between them and Nyetian. This was something they did not want to see. The 6 city lords no longer hesitated. Their figures jumped together and entered the abyss. At the same time, in the abyss, Nyetian's figure fell extremely low, and he slowly felt that there was a burning aura coming from below. As he got closer and closer to the bottom of the abyss, he felt that the burning aura was more intense. This feeling was like he was falling towards a huge furnace. After a moment, Nyetian saw the surrounding space gradually become bright. He looked down and found that the cliffs around the abyss were actually flowing with crimson magma. The light in the space was coming from the crimson magma. He stabilized his body and slowed down his descent. Following the magma, Nyetian felt that the burning aura in the space was getting stronger, making him feel like he was in a furnace. Continuing downwards, Nyetian's forehead was covered in beads of sweat, and his whole body was sweating profusely. He estimated that the temperature here was over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Cultivators below, over God, would probably be roasted instantly if they entered. He was extremely cautious as he spread out his divine sense to investigate the situation below. QL11 feeling that he was about to reach the bottom of the abyss. He looked down and saw a huge magma lake. Above the lake, tongues of fire were boiling and leaping about ceaselessly, as if they wanted to burn everything. At this moment, Nyetian felt the blood in his body become restless, as if it was boiling. The fiend god ocean in the space of the fiend god nascent embryo was turbulent. Waves of fiend god energy crashed violently, creating terrifying waves. Mother! Nyetian's eyes suddenly trembled. He stared at the magma lake and shouted with a trembling expression. He could sense that Chiwu Yunxiu was nearby. Boom! At this moment, a violent tongue of fire suddenly rose from the magma lake and rushed into the air. Nyetian was stunned and instinctively took a step back. The next moment, the scene that appeared in front of him completely stunned him. The tongue of fire froze in the air and gradually became clearer. It was a person. That figure's entire body was flowing with scarlet magma. His entire body seemed to be burning, constantly releasing violent flames. It was hard to imagine that a person could survive in such an extreme environment. Nyetian looked at the figure of fire and was stunned. His lips were trembling, but he could not make a sound. Nyetian, my child, you've come after all. At this moment, the figure of fire spoke. It was elegant, gentle, and kind. Although the voice was a little weak, it was the voice that Nyetian had heard before. Without a doubt, this figure of fire was Nyetian's mother, Chiwu Yunxiu. Chiwu Yunxiu's lips trembled slightly. To her, even the slightest movement would bring about great pain. However, for Nyetian, for her child, she was willing to endure any pain. Under the cover of the magma, Chiwu Yunxiu's face was very blurry. However, from her facial features, one could tell that she was a peerless beauty. Mother, mother! Nyetian was stunned for a few seconds. Finally, he reacted and opened his mouth slightly. Even his lips were trembling slightly. He never thought that the scene of mother and son reuniting would be like this. He could even feel the pain that Chiwu Yunxiu was enduring at this moment. The burning magma enveloped her body, and her skin was constantly being melted. This pain was not heart-wrenching, but deep into her soul. He could not imagine how Chiwu Yunxiu had endured for so many years. Sigh. When Chiwu Yunxiu heard Nietian shout, her bloodshot eyes trembled. Two pools of tears flashed across her eyes. Even though the magma was flowing down her face, one could still see how agitated she was. However, this agitation brought her even greater pain. However, her heart was filled with happiness, contentment, and bliss. Mother, don't move. I'm here to save you. Nietian was suddenly aware of Chiwu Yunxiu's pain. Suppressing the agitation and anger in his heart, he dashed towards Chiwu Yunxiu. Nietian, don't come near me. However, Chiwu Yunxiu screamed in horror. It was as if something terrible was about to happen. Unfortunately, it was too late. Swoosh! Nietian moved instantly. However, just as he was about to approach Chiwu Yunxiu, a voice rang out. Immediately, a crimson flame chain surged out from Chiwu Yunxiu's body. Swoosh! In an instant, the flame chain slithered out like a giant snake and attacked Nietian. Everything happened too suddenly. Nietian was completely defenseless. He could only activate the heavenly light armor subconsciously. Bam! In the next instant, the flaming chains bombarded the extreme Yang Sky armor, shattering it with a resounding boom. Uft! The flame chain hit Nietian's chest and penetrated his body. Nietian let out a blood-curdling screech as he was sent flying backward and smashed heavily into the lava-flowing cliff. Upon seeing this, Chiwu Yunxiu couldn't help but exclaim, Nietian. His blurry face instantly froze. She knew very well how powerful the flame chain was. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been trapped in the magma lake. Mother, I'm fine. Nietian stabilized his body in the air and said while enduring the pain. His chest was penetrated by the flame chain. He felt as if the wound was being roasted by flames. His entire body was about to burn. He immediately released the heart of nihility to forcefully devour the flames around the wound to stabilize his condition. What is this? Nietian fixed his eyes on the flame chain in the air and growled cold. Bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. At this moment, he heard the voice of Fat Cat in his divine sense. As soon as little Fat Cat's voice fell, a terrifying scene unfolded before them. Swoosh! 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 Flaming chains surged out from Chiwu Yunxiu's body. They were like giant flaming snakes that surrounded her body. Chapter 2436. 9 flaming chains coiled around Chiwu Yunxiu like giant flaming snakes, wrapping around her entire body. What the hell are these damn chains? Nietian was thoroughly infuriated by what had just happened and bellowed furiously. Nietian, calm down. These are bone-eroding soul shackles. They are very scary. Don't get close to them. Fat Cat warned Nietian anxiously. Damn it! At this moment, Nietian was enraged. His blood chi was surging, and his sword intent was surging like raging waves. Break it! Then, like a wild beast, he roared and slashed with starlight heavenly slash. A sword shadow flew out. Kaboom! The sword shadow landed on the bone-eroding soul shackles, but to no avail. The bone-eroding soul shackles did not break at all. Ah! Right at this moment, Chiwu Yunxiu's miserable scream sounded out. It was a heart-wrenching scream that was incomparably mournful. Mother! Nietian's pupils contracted when he heard the voice. He became much calmer. It was obvious that his attack had caused great pain to Chiwu Yunxiu. I'm fine, Chiwu Yunxiu said in a trembling voice. Her body was trembling as she endured the pain. Nietian, calm down, Fat Cat said angrily. The bone-eroding soul shackles are not something you can break. Your recklessness will only make your mother suffer more. Nietian's expression froze for a moment before he calmed down and said in a serious tone, Mother, don't worry. I'll definitely get you out of here. Yes. I believe in you. Chiwu Yunxiu nodded. The tears in her eyes evaporated before they flowed out. Nietian calmed himself down and asked in a serious tone, Little fatty, what exactly is this bone-eroding soul shackle? The bone-eroding soul shackling chains are a type of curse shackles. The flaming chains you see aren't physical, but are formed by curse runes. Seeing that Nyetian became cold, the fat cat said in a deep voice, "These spell runes are stored in your mother's body. When she senses danger, they will automatically come out." Nyetian narrowed his eyes and asked, "What's the use of these runes?" "Devour bone, soul refinement," the fat cat said solemnly. Not only can the cursed shackles slowly corrode a martial artist's bones and meridians, it can also slowly refine a martial artist's soul and bloodline power. Furthermore, the process of eroding the bones and refining the soul is extremely slow. On the other hand, the cursed shackles can ensure that the martial artist does not die, making the martial artist suffer unimaginable pain. Bastard! When Yetian heard this, he lost control of his emotions again and roared crazily. At this moment, he finally understood why Chiwi Yunxiu was imprisoned in the lava lake but did not die. It was because of the cursed shackles in her body. The person who did this to her did not want to kill her, but to torture her to the fullest extent. Nyetian, calm down. The fat cat reminded Nyetian again to calm down. What had already happened. No amount of anger would help. The most important thing now was that Chiwu Yunxiu was still alive. Nyetian took a deep breath, forced himself to calm down, and asked in a deep voice, "Little fatty, how can I save my mother?" When the fat cat heard Nyetian's question, it fell silent and did not speak for a long time. If Nyetian wanted to save Chiwu Yunxiu, he would have to destroy the bone-eroding soul shackles or pull it out. However, the fat cat had already sensed that the bone-eroding soul shackles in Chiwu Yunxiu's body was so powerful that it could only be destroyed by a demi-saint or a pseudo-saint. Nyetian's current ability was too far away from that of a demi-saint or a pseudo-saint. Moreover, there was not a single demi-saint in the entire 9 realms. "Is there any way, Fat?" Nyetian asked again, seeing that the fat cat had not spoken for a long time. "No." The fat cat shook its head helplessly and answered truthfully. "Unless a demi-saint appears, or the one who planted the curse shackles would remove the curse on their own." Nyetian's face stiffened, his entire body frozen. The fat cat's words were no different from a thunderclap that he could not accept. He had finally found his mother. She was right before his eyes, and she was suffering tremendous pain every single moment. And yet, he was powerless. How could he accept that? Impossible. It's impossible. There must be a way. Nyetian roared out of the blue as if he had gone mad. "Nyetian, don't be so agitated." Before the fat cat could speak, Chiwu Yunxiu's voice rang. "I know very well how frightening the bone-eroding soul shackles are. Ever since the first day I was imprisoned here, I never thought that I could get out alive. I'm already very content to be able to see you once before I die. It's just a pity that I won't be able to see your father again. Our family of 3 will never be able to reunite." "Mother, don't say any more." Nyetian could not bear to listen any longer. With a low growl, his eyes welled with hot tears. He clenched his fists tightly, his blazing eyes almost bloodshot as he solemnly said, "I will save Mother even if I die." Every word, every sentence, every word like blood. "My child." Chiwu Yunxiu's heart trembled. Her body trembled slightly, and she could no longer speak. She was extremely proud to have such an outstanding son. What a great show! The deep love between mother and son. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly rang out. Such a touching scene. I want to cry. Another voice rang out, echoing in the abyss. It was harsh and mocking. "Who's there?" Nyetian suddenly raised his head. He saw 6 figures standing in the distance. These 6 figures stood in the air. Although they had different expressions, their appearances were exactly the same. And they looked exactly the same as Li Juhun and Li Qi. Obviously, these 6 people were the Dark Emperor's secondary bodies, just like Li Qi and Li Juhun. These 6 people had been hiding somewhere, and now they appeared like ghosts. "Who are you?" Nyetian's eyes were as cold as killing intent as he stared at the 6 of them. "I heard that you've already killed Li Qi and Li Jiao. Now that you've seen us, can't you guess who we are?" One of them said coldly. His tone was full of mockery. You're the same as Li Qi. You're all the Dark Emperor's secondary bodies. Nie Tian said in a deep voice. His eyes were full of killing intent. That's right. We've been waiting for you here for a long time. I didn't expect you to come so quickly. You even let us watch a show of deep love between mother and son for free. Another person said coldly with a face full of contempt. It was obvious that these 6 people had been waiting in the abyss for a long time. They just didn't show up. Very well. Yet Tian's lips twitched. His killing intent surged to the extreme. He said coldly, "If I can't kill the Dark Emperor, I'll kill you first." You? Another Dark Emperor's secondary body said with a face full of contempt. These 6 secondary bodies were no weaker than Li Qi, and were all very close to the peak of the god realm. Nie Tian was only a mid-paramount god. How could he possibly take on 6 of them by himself? There's still us. However, just as the deputy's voice faded, a powerful voice rang out from the sky. Chapter 24:37. The 7 city lords appeared at the same time, and their auras were so powerful that the space around them started to tremble. Nie Tian's eyes lit up when he saw the 7 city lords. He didn't expect them to follow him into the abyss. The 7 city lords were very cautious when they entered the abyss, so they were a little slow. QL11, fortunately, they appeared at the right time. Judging from the strength of the 7 of you, you should be the 7 city lords of the main cities, right? The 6 Dark Emperor subbodies were stunned at first, but one of them sneered and said in disdain, "I really didn't expect this kid to have so many city lords working for him in just a few days." Another subbody said coldly with a smile on his face. It was obvious that the 6 subbodies did not take the 7 city lords seriously. We only found out now that Li Juhan is not the son of the Dark Emperor, but the subbody of the Dark Emperor, the spiritualist replied with a smile and cold. "What's the use of knowing more when you're about to die?" One of the subbodies sneered and said, "Attack." In the blink of an eye, the 6 secondary bodies moved in unison and charged towards the 7 city lords. The auras of the 6 of them were extremely powerful. When they were released at the same time and fused together, the surging momentum seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth. Whoosh! The 6 of them attacked at the same time, and 6 forces merged together. A blackwood claw appeared in the void and shrouded the 7 city lords. *T. The 7 city lords felt the murderous aura and screamed at the same time. The joint attack of the 6 subbodies was too terrifying. Even an immortal state warrior would be killed on the spot. Although the strength of the 6 subbodies was only close to the immortal state warrior, they came from the same body and had the same aura. When they joined forces, their aura was even stronger than that of an immortal state warrior. Attack! The 7 city lords were all powerful warriors and reacted instantly. They released their auras at the same time and joined forces. Then, they attacked at the same time, and the 7 forces merged to form a huge palm shadow. Yet Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw this. It was a rare sight to see a battle between 13 experts at the pinnacle. Boom! In the next moment, the blackwood claw collided with the enormous palm shadow, and a loud rumble erupted in the sky. Waves of explosive force surged out and wreaked havoc in the space. The lava on the cliffs around the abyss crumbled under the impact, and the blazing aura in the air became even more intense. Boom! Chi. The 2 forces were too powerful to destroy each other, so they could only devour and tear each other apart, making ear-piercing noises in the air. Boom! A moment later, an explosion rang out, and the enormous palm shadow formed by the 7 city lords collapsed. In the next instant, He Mu's sharp claws descended, and the 7 city lords were sent flying, slamming heavily into the cliff. There were even a few people whose bodies were deeply embedded in the cliff. 7 great city lords. The 6 deputies stabilized their bodies. One of them sneered and said insolently, "A pile of dog shit." The 6 subbodies joined forces and defeated the 7 city lords with just one move. Although this outcome was unexpected, if one thought about it carefully, it was not surprising at all. In fact, the strength of the 7 great city lords was not weaker than the Dark Emperor subbody. However, The 6 Dark Emperor subbodies came from the same source, and their auras were completely the same. They had a tacit understanding with each other, and their auras could be perfectly integrated. And the 7 great city lords even had different attributes. Even if they joined forces, they could not burst out with too much power. If it was a one-on-one fight, the 7 great city lords could definitely kill the 6 subbodies. But if they joined forces to fight, the 7 great city lords could only be the ones being oppressed. Damn it! 5th City Lord Chi Lan's figure stabilized, and he growled, blood hanging from the corner of his mouth. His strength was considered strong among the 7 city lords, so his injury was not serious. There were 3 slightly weaker city lords who were already covered in blood, seriously injured, and had lost the power to fight. With this kind of trash strength, you're also worthy of being a city lord. What a joke. Another deputy's voice sounded extremely sarcastic. Chi Lan and the others looked extremely embarrassed. They did not expect that the 6 deputies' strength would be so strong when they joined forces. City lords, stand down, Nietian said, glaring at the 6th deputy like a vicious wolf. We defeated 7 city lords with a single move, you brat. You're just a piece of mid-paramount god trash. How dare you be so arrogant? One of the deputies' cold eyes looked at Nietian with contempt and provocation. We defeated 7 city magistrates with a single move, you brat. How dare a piece of trash like you, a mid-paramount god, act so arrogant? One of his lieutenants said, looking at Nietian with cold, provocative eyes. Why don't you give it a try? Nietian said with a cold smile, his voice deep and filled with killing intent. Are you looking to die? The deputy roared furiously. His body flickered into motion as he attacked. Rumble. A palm descended, and a blackwood ghost claw appeared, which slashed viciously toward Nietian. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he was filled with killing intent. He raised his arms slightly and punched out with the force of 10,000 caddies in his palm. Rumble. A black fist appeared, which pounced forward like a wild beast and shattered the blackwood ghost claw. Bam! Following that, a muffled sound was heard as the secondary body was sent flying. While it was still in the air, it shattered and turned into a pile of sawdust that dissipated. This sudden scene caused the other subbodies to be startled, and then they cried out in unison, Old 6. They were the 6 most powerful subordinates of the Dark Sovereign. They were Li 1, Li 2, Li 3, Li 4, Li 5, and Li 6. The one who had just been killed by Nietian was none other than Li 6. Upon seeing Li 6's death, the eyes of the other 5 secondary bodies flickered as they fixed their eyes on Nietian, flabbergasted. How could they have ever imagined that Nietian would be so strong? Nietian hovered there in midair, the power of 9,000 devils surging around him, making him look like a devil god looking down on everything. At this moment, Chiwu Yunxiu looked even more pained. Once again, she activated the sealing power in Nietian's body to help Nietian awaken the power of 9,000 devils. Nietian sensed that the devilish divine power seemed to be even more violent than before. Even he was shocked by the dark aura it emanated. All of you must die. At this moment, Nietian spoke. His lips curled into a cold, murderous intent, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. The 5 deputies were shrouded by the murderous intent. They trembled at the same time, and their expressions were filled with unconcealable fear. In front of Nietian, they felt like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Died obediently. In the next moment, Nietian spoke in a low voice. His figure moved, and the power of the devils around him condensed into a suit of armor, making him look like a dark giant. Bam! He punched out, and a huge black fist shadow, with an unparalleled force, pressed down on the 5 secondary bodies. The 5 deputies felt the aura of death approaching them, and the fear in their hearts was displayed perfectly on their faces.